What happens when a split-second decision on a rain-soaked street forces a struggling single father to save the life of the woman who humiliated him just hours before? Tonight, Daniel Hayes will make a choice that changes everything, not just for himself, but for the billionaire CEO who never saw him as human until the moment she needed him most. This is a story about invisible kindness, unexpected connections, and the courage to walk away from something that could destroy you both. Stay until the end, hit that like button, and comment your city below so I can see how far this story travels. The rain came without warning. One moment, the September sky hung heavy and pregnant with the threat of storm. The next, the clouds split open like a wound, dumping sheets of cold water onto the nearly deserted streets of downtown Seattle. It was the kind of rain that erased the world, turned traffic lights into blurred halos of red and green, made the asphalt shimmer like black glass, reduced visibility to maybe 20 feet if you were lucky. Daniel Hayes hunched forward in the driver's seat of his 12-year-old Honda Civic, squinting through the windshield as the wipers beat a frantic rhythm that couldn't keep pace with the deluge. His hands gripped the steering wheel with the careful tension of someone who knew exactly how bald his tires were, exactly how much distance he needed to brake safely, exactly how many dollars he didn't have to replace them. The clock on the dashboard read 11:47 p.m. in sickly green digits. Another 16-hour day, another shift that started before dawn and ended long after his son should have been in bed. Another day of invisible labor that ground him down to something raw and exhausted, something that felt less like a man and more like a machine designed only to survive. In the back seat, 6-year-old Marcus slept with his head tilted against the window, mouth slightly open, his small chest rising and falling with the deep, trustful rhythm of childhood. He still wore his after-school program t-shirt, a faded blue thing, with a cartoon rocket on the front. His backpack sat beside him, overstuffed with the homework he'd tried to complete while waiting for his father to finish work. Daniel glanced in the rearview mirror, and his throat tightened. Just a few more years, he told himself. Just hold on a few more years and things will get easier. Marcus will be older. The business degree you're doing online will be finished. Something will break your way. The lies we tell ourselves to survive. He turned his attention back to the road, navigating the familiar route home, down Fifth Avenue, through the financial district where glass towers loomed like the crystallized ambitions of people who had never known what it meant to choose between groceries and electricity. This was the part of the city where Daniel didn't belong, except as labor, except as the guy who fixed things, who cleaned things, who made things work for people who would never learn his name. The storm intensified, thunder cracked overhead like the sky breaking apart. And that's when he saw her. At first, she was just a shape, a figure stumbling along the sidewalk near the intersection of Fifth and Pine, where construction barriers narrowed the road and made the whole block feel claustrophobic even in daylight. In the rain and darkness, it looked like a trap. Daniel's foot eased off the accelerator. The figure lurched sideways, catching herself against a sleek black Mercedes that sat disabled in the right lane, hazard lights blinking uselessly. She wore what might have once been an elegant dress, something dark and expensive, but now it clung to her like wet paper, completely ruined. Her hair hung in dark ropes around her face. Even from a distance, Daniel could see she was in trouble, and she was moving toward the street, not carefully, not with awareness. She was stumbling, disoriented, one hand pressed to her temple while the other reached out blindly for support that wasn't there. Daniel's brain made a dozen calculations in the space between heartbeats. Not your problem. You don't know her. You've got Marcus in the car. It's almost midnight. This isn't your neighborhood. People who look like that have people to help them. Call 911 and keep driving. But his hands were already moving, pulling the Civic toward the curb. Just check. Just make sure she's okay. 30 seconds. That's all. He put the car in park, glanced back at Marcus, still sleeping, thank God, and pushed open the door. The rain hit him like a physical assault, instantly soaking through his work jacket, his flannel shirt, plastering his dark hair to his forehead. The cold stole his breath. "Hey!" he called out, jogging toward the woman. "Hey, are you okay?" She didn't seem to hear him. She had reached the edge of the sidewalk now, one foot actually stepping down into the street, into the running water that coursed through the gutter. Her other foot followed, and Daniel heard it. The deep grinding rumble of a heavy vehicle approaching too fast for conditions. Headlights swept around the corner 2 blocks up. A semi-truck, massive and unstoppable, barreling through the intersection because the driver probably couldn't even see the disabled Mercedes until it was too late to matter. The woman stood directly in its path. Time did that thing it does in moments of crisis, stretched thin like taffy, made every detail impossibly sharp. Daniel saw the way her shoulders swayed, saw her take another step forward, saw the truck's headlights catch the rain and turn it silver. He didn't think. He just moved. His feet pounded across the wet pavement. 3 strides. 4. His hand shot out and caught her arm just as she fully entered the lane, just as the truck's air horn blasted a warning that shattered the night. He yanked her backward with enough force that they both stumbled, fell together onto the sidewalk in a tangle of limbs and soaked fabric. The truck roared past, close enough that Daniel felt the displacement of air, felt the spray of water from its massive tires, felt the rumble of its weight shake the ground beneath him. Then it was gone, taillights disappearing into the storm. For a moment, neither of them moved. They lay there on the cold, wet concrete, both breathing hard, both alive. Daniel was the first to recover. He pushed himself up onto his hands and knees, rain streaming down his face, and turned to check on the woman he'd just pulled from the street. "Are you?" The words died in his throat. She had rolled onto her back, one arm flung across her face, breathing in short, sharp gasps. But when she lowered her arm and looked up at him, when the streetlight caught her features, Daniel's entire body went cold in a way that had nothing to do with the rain. It was her. Isabella Laurent. He would have recognized that face anywhere. It had been burned into his memory just 8 hours earlier when she'd stood in the executive conference room on the 42nd floor of Laurent Industries headquarters and delivered a presentation about operational efficiency that was really just a polite way of saying she planned to gut the maintenance department. Daniel had been there because his supervisor was sick, because someone needed to represent the facilities team, because he'd drawn the short straw. He'd sat in the back of that gleaming conference room, the only person there in work clothes instead of a suit, and listened to Isabella Laurent explain in her crisp, educated accent how they could save money by outsourcing half his department. She hadn't looked at him, not once during that entire 90-minute meeting. To her, he might as well have been furniture. But he'd looked at her, had studied the way she commanded that room. 30 years old and already running a multi-billion-dollar company, already a legend in Seattle's business community. Beautiful in that intimidating way that came from money and confidence and never once having to worry whether you could afford to fix your car. Her dark hair had been pulled back in a sleek twist. Her charcoal suit had probably cost more than Daniel made in a month. Her eyes, pale gray, sharp as surgical steel, had moved across spreadsheets and profit margins with the kind of focus that made it clear she saw people as numbers. After the meeting, Daniel had approached her assistant with a question about severance packages for the workers who would lose their jobs. The assistant had brushed him off with barely concealed contempt. "Ms. Laurent doesn't handle personnel matters at that level," the woman had said, as if Daniel had asked for an audience with royalty. He'd gone back to work, descended 42 floors to the basement mechanical rooms, and spent the rest of his shift fixing a boiler while trying not to think about how he'd explain to Marcus if he lost this job. And now, here she was, Isabella Laurent, billionaire CEO, the woman who had looked through him like glass, lying on a rain-soaked sidewalk, mascara running down her cheeks, her expensive dress torn at the shoulder, her eyes unfocused and glassy, completely helpless. "You?" she whispered, and there was no recognition in her voice, just confusion. "You pulled me." "Don't move," Daniel said, "because that's what you say. Because training kicks in even when your brain is screaming other things. You almost got hit. Just stay still for a second." He looked around, taking quick inventory. The disabled Mercedes, the empty street, no other pedestrians. The rain showed no signs of stopping. "Can you stand?" he asked. She blinked up at him, and he could see she was trying to focus, trying to process. Her lips moved, but no sound came out at first. Then, I don't know." The smell of alcohol hit him then, sharp and unmistakable even in the rain. Not overwhelming, but present. She'd been drinking. How much, he couldn't tell, but enough to explain the stumbling, the disorientation. "Not your problem," his survival instincts whispered. She's rich. She's got people. Call someone and go home. But he could see her hands shaking, could see the way her breathing had gone shallow and rapid, shock, maybe, or panic, or both. Could see that despite the expensive car and the designer dress and the empire she commanded, right now she was just a person who needed help. And despite everything, despite the meeting, despite the casual cruelty of people who never saw him, Daniel couldn't walk away. Okay, he said quietly. Let's get you up. He hooked his hands under her arms and carefully lifted, supporting most of her weight as she struggled to find her footing. She leaned heavily against him, and he could feel her trembling. My car, she mumbled, gesturing vaguely toward the Mercedes. It just stopped. Everything stopped. We'll deal with it, Daniel said. Right now we need to get you out of the rain. He guided her toward his Civic, acutely aware of how ridiculous this must look. Him in his soaked work clothes, her in what remained of an evening gown, both of them stumbling through a storm like refugees from different worlds. When they reached the car, Daniel saw Marcus starting to stir in the back seat. Dad? The small voice was thick with sleep. It's okay, buddy, Daniel said, opening the passenger door and helping Isabella inside. Just someone who needs help. Close your eyes, okay? He pulled off his jacket, already soaked, but warmer than nothing, and draped it over Isabella's shoulders. She pulled it close with hands that wouldn't stop shaking, and he noticed her nails were still perfectly manicured despite everything else falling apart. Daniel slid into the driver's seat and cranked up the heat, even though it would murder his gas mileage. The car filled with the sound of the struggling heater and the drumming rain. Where do you live? He asked. Isabella's head lolled against the seat. Her eyes were closed now, but tears leaked from beneath her lids, mixing with the rain and ruined makeup. Mercer Island, she whispered. 1247 West Mercer Way. Of course. Mercer Island, where the houses started at 3 million and went up from there. Daniel pulled out his phone, pulled up the address. 15 minutes in good traffic. Maybe 25 in this storm. He glanced at the gas gauge, just under a quarter tank. Enough, barely. This is insane, he thought. You should take her to a hospital, call her people, let someone else handle this. But he was already pulling away from the curb, already committing to this thing that made no logical sense. In the back seat, Marcus had fallen back asleep, his small face peaceful and trusting in a way that made Daniel's chest ache. They drove in silence for a while, the only sounds the rain and the heater, and occasionally a small, choked noise from Isabella that might have been a sob or might have been something else. Daniel kept his eyes on the road, both hands on the wheel, trying not to think about what he was doing or why he was doing it. They crossed the I-90 bridge, leaving the city lights behind. The storm seemed even worse over the water, wind buffeting the small car, making it shudder and sway. Why did you stop? Isabella's voice came suddenly, raw and broken. Why did you help me? Daniel glanced at her. She was looking at him now, really looking, her gray eyes red-rimmed and searching. Because you needed it, he said simply. You don't know me. I know you better than you think, he could have said. I know you decided today that people like me are expendable. I know you've never once considered what it means to worry about rent or food or whether your kid's shoes will last another month. But he didn't say any of that. Because right now, in this moment, she wasn't a CEO. She was just a person who had almost died. Doesn't matter, he said instead. She made that sound again, definitely a sob this time. Her hand came up to cover her mouth, and her shoulders shook with silent crying. Daniel drove on. The houses on Mercer Island emerged from the rain like ships in fog, massive modern estates set back from the road behind gates and manicured lawns. When they reached 1247 West Mercer Way, Daniel had to sit there for a moment just taking it in. It wasn't a house. It was an architectural statement, all glass and steel and clean lines built on a slope that gave it a commanding view of Lake Washington. Lights glowed softly from within, reflecting off the wet stone of the driveway. Do you have your keys? Daniel asked. Isabella fumbled at her small clutch purse, somehow still looped around her wrist, and produced a key card. Her hand shook so badly she dropped it. I'll get it, Daniel said. He put the car in park, glanced back to make sure Marcus was still sleeping, and came around to help Isabella out. She could barely walk, leaning on him heavily as they made their way to the front door. He swiped the key card and the door clicked open, revealing an interior that looked like something from a magazine, all white marble and contemporary art and furniture that was probably worth more than his entire apartment building. "Where's your bedroom?" he asked. She gestured vaguely toward a curved staircase. Daniel half carried her up the stairs, trying not to look at the life-sized paintings on the walls, the crystal light fixtures, the obvious wealth that surrounded them like atmosphere. At the top, he found the master suite, a room bigger than his entire apartment, with a bed that could have slept 4 people comfortably. He helped her sit on the edge of the bed, and she swayed there, looking small and lost despite the grandeur around her. "Are you going to be okay?" he asked. "Is there someone I should call?" She shook her head slowly. "No one. There's no one." Something in the way she said it made Daniel pause. This woman who had everything, the empire, the mansion, the life that people dreamed about, sat in her palace and said there was no one to call. "Can you get yourself changed?" he asked. "Get into bed?" She nodded, but didn't move. Daniel grabbed a trash can from the bathroom and set it beside the bed, found a glass, filled it with water, left it on the nightstand, opened the windows a crack to let in fresh air. Did all the things you do for someone who might be sick, who might not remember the night. "Will you tell them?" Isabella asked suddenly. Her voice was very small. "Tell who what?" "At work. Will you? Everyone will know that you saw me like this." Daniel looked at her, really looked, and he saw what nobody else would have seen. Not a billionaire, not a CEO, just a 30-year-old woman who was terrified of being seen as human. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said quietly. "I spent my whole evening at home with my son. Never went anywhere, never saw anything." Fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. "Why?" "Because everybody deserves one night when they can fall apart," Daniel said. "And because whatever happened tonight, it's not my story to tell." He turned to go, but her hand shot out and caught his wrist. Her grip was surprisingly strong. "Thank you," she whispered. "You saved my life, and you don't even know me." "I know you better than you think," Daniel thought again, but all he said was, "Get some sleep. You'll feel better in the morning." He gently extracted his wrist from her grip and walked out, pulling the door mostly closed behind him. Downstairs, he stood in that palatial entryway for just a moment, taking it all in, trying to understand the strange mathematics of a world where someone could have everything and still end up stumbling drunk into traffic. Trying to reconcile the woman upstairs, broken and crying and grateful, with the cold executive who had casually planned to destroy lives that morning. Then he left, closing the door softly behind him. The rain had lessened to a drizzle. Daniel sat in his car for a moment, suddenly exhausted in a way that went beyond the physical. His clothes were still soaked. His hands were shaking now too, adrenaline crash probably. In the back seat, Marcus stirred. "Dad, are we home?" "Almost, buddy, almost." Daniel started the car and drove back across the bridge, back toward the small apartment in Ballard where he and Marcus had lived for the past 3 years, back to the world where people like him belonged. As he drove, he thought about what might have happened if he'd been 30 seconds slower, if he'd chosen differently. If he'd listened to the voice that said this wasn't his problem, Isabella Laurent would be dead, and Daniel Hayes would have driven past her without ever knowing. He glanced at Marcus in the rearview mirror, back asleep, trusting that his father would get them home safe. And Daniel made a decision that he wouldn't even consciously recognize until much later. He would never tell anyone about tonight, would never mention it at work, would never use it for leverage or favors or anything else. What happened in the rain would stay in the rain, not because he was noble, not because he was a saint, but because he'd learned a long time ago that people like Isabella Laurent lived in a different world, played by different rules. And the worst thing a person like him could do was forget where he belonged. So he would go back to work on Monday, would fix the boilers and change the filters and do his job, would survive the layoffs if they came, would keep his head down and his mouth shut. And Isabella Laurent would go back to being the woman in the tower, making decisions about efficiency and profitability and all the things that mattered in her world. Tonight would fade like a dream, like something that happened to different people in a different life. At least, that's what Daniel told himself as he pulled into his apartment complex, carried his sleeping son upstairs, and finally collapsed into bed at 1:30 in the morning. He told himself that tonight would change nothing. He was wrong. The rain continued through the night, washing the streets clean, erasing all evidence of what had happened at the intersection of 5th and Pine. By morning, it would be as if the storm had never come at all. As if the moment of crisis had been nothing but imagination. But some things, some choices, some connections can't be washed away so easily. Some debts survive the rain, and sometimes the people we save end up saving us in return. What Daniel didn't know, as he finally drifted into exhausted sleep, was that Isabella Laurent would remember everything, and that memory would change both their lives in ways neither of them could possibly imagine. Monday morning arrived with the kind of cruel brightness that made Daniel's exhaustion feel worse. He'd slept maybe 4 hours total, his mind replaying the scene at the intersection every time he closed his eyes. The truck's headlights, Isabella's stumbling steps, the moment his hand caught her arm and pulled her back from death. He stood at the bathroom sink, staring at his reflection while Marcus brushed his teeth beside him. Dark circles shadowed his eyes. A bruise was forming on his shoulder where he'd hit the pavement. His work shirt hung loose on a frame that had gotten thinner over the past year. Not from exercise, but from the kind of weight loss that came from skipping meals so your kid could eat. "Dad, you look tired," Marcus said, foam from toothpaste at the corners of his mouth. "I'm okay, buddy. Just didn't sleep great." Because of the storm? Daniel thought about the woman in the rain, the drive to Mercer Island, the mansion that existed in a different universe. Yeah, because of the storm. He got Marcus to school by 7:30, then drove to Laurent Industries' downtown headquarters. The building rose 42 stories into the cloudless September sky, all steel and glass, reflecting the morning sun like a monument to ambition. Daniel parked in the employee garage on sublevel 3, grabbed his tool bag from the trunk, and took the service elevator down to the basement mechanical rooms. This was his world. The guts of the building, where massive HVAC systems hummed and boilers heated water for the gleaming offices above, where pipes ran like arteries through concrete walls, and electrical panels controlled systems that the people upstairs never thought about. It was hot down here, perpetually dim despite the fluorescent lights, and it smelled like machine oil and dust. His supervisor, Rick Martinez, was already there, checking pressure gauges on the main boiler. "Hey's good. Need you on cooling tower 4. Someone's complaining about temperature fluctuations on 38. "On it," Daniel said, grateful for work that would keep his hands busy and his mind occupied. He spent the morning up on the roof, diagnosing a failing valve in one of the cooling towers, while the city spread out below him. From up here, Seattle looked almost peaceful. The rain had washed everything clean, and Puget Sound glittered in the distance like hammered silver. He tried not to think about Isabella Laurent, tried not to wonder if she remembered anything from Friday night, tried not to imagine what might happen if she did remember, if she recognized him, if she said something, if the story got out. "It won't," he told himself. "People like her don't remember people like you. You're invisible. That's how this works." By lunchtime, he'd replaced the valve and was back in the mechanical room, washing the grease off his hands in the utility sink. Rick appeared with a concerned look on his weathered face. "Hey, you hear the news?" Daniel's stomach dropped. "What news?" "Laurent's calling an all-hands meeting. 3 o'clock, main lobby. Mandatory for everyone." Rick shook his head. "Never good when they do that. Bet it's about the layoffs, probably announcing who's getting cut." The relief Daniel felt that it wasn't about Friday night was immediately swallowed by fresh anxiety. The layoffs. The thing that had been hanging over the facilities department like a sword for the past month. "All of us have to go?" Daniel asked. "Every employee, even the basement rats like us." Rick managed a bitter smile. "Want to make sure we all hear how operational efficiency is going to make the company stronger while they're showing us the door." Daniel spent the afternoon trying to prepare himself for the worst, mentally calculating how long his savings would last. Running through options for cheaper apartments, cheaper childcare, cheaper everything. Wondering if he could pick up a second job, if there even were second jobs for a 32-year-old guy whose only real skill was fixing things. At 2:45, he changed into the clean work shirt he kept in his locker and joined the stream of employees heading for the main lobby. The contrast was jarring, him in his navy blue facilities uniform, surrounded by people in suits and designer dresses, everyone flowing toward the same destination but clearly from different worlds. The lobby was already packed when he arrived. Laurent Industries' main entrance was designed to intimidate, soaring 3 stories high with marble floors and a massive abstract sculpture that supposedly cost more than Daniel's annual salary. Temporary barriers had been set up to create a presentation area near the elevators with a small stage and microphone. Daniel positioned himself at the back of the crowd, behind a pillar where he could see but wouldn't be easily noticed. Old habits. When you were invisible, you stayed invisible. The crowd noise was a low murmur, hundreds of conversations about weekend plans and project deadlines and who was getting promoted and who might be getting fired. Daniel recognized some faces from facilities, but mostly these were strangers. The people who worked in the tower, who dealt with contracts and marketing, and all the things that generated the money that kept everyone employed. At exactly 3 o'clock, the elevator at the far end opened. Isabella Laurent stepped out, and the lobby fell silent. She wore a charcoal suit, different from the one last week, but equally expensive, equally perfect. Her dark hair was pulled back in that same sleek twist. She moved with the kind of confidence that came from never doubting you belonged in whatever space you occupied. 2 assistants flanked her, along with several people Daniel recognized as senior executives. But something was different. Daniel couldn't quite put his finger on it at first. She looked the same, polished, professional, in complete control. But there was something in the way she held herself, a slight tension in her shoulders that hadn't been there before. She stepped up to the microphone, and those pale gray eyes swept across the assembled crowd. For just a second, so brief Daniel might have imagined it, her gaze caught on him, standing behind the pillar in the back. Then she looked away and began to speak. "Thank you all for gathering on short notice." Her voice carried through the lobby, amplified and crystalline. "I know that uncertainty has been difficult for many of you over the past few weeks. The proposal to restructure our facilities and maintenance operations created a lot of anxiety, and you deserve clarity." Daniel's hands clenched at his sides. "I want to address that proposal directly. After careful consideration and a thorough review of the actual operational data, not just the initial projections, I've decided not to move forward with the outsourcing plan." A ripple of surprise moved through the crowd. Daniel felt his breath catch. "The facilities team is essential to this company's success," Isabella continued, and now there was something different in her voice, something almost fierce. "They keep this building running. They solve problems most of us never even know exist. They work hours that others won't work, doing jobs that others can't do. And I made a mistake in not recognizing that value from the beginning." She paused, and Daniel saw her hands tighten slightly on the edges of the podium. "Moving forward, instead of cutting these positions, we're going to invest in them. Better equipment, better training, better compensation. Because a company is only as strong as the people who build it, and I failed to remember that. I won't make that mistake again." The lobby erupted in scattered applause. Daniel stood frozen, trying to process what he'd just heard. Around him, people from facilities were grinning, slapping each other on the back, relief written across their faces. But Daniel's eyes were on Isabella, on the way she gripped that podium like it was the only thing keeping her upright, on the slight tremor in her hands that no one else would notice unless they were looking for it. She took a breath and continued. "There's one more thing. Starting next month, Laurent Industries will be launching a new initiative to support employees who are also parents. Flexible scheduling, subsidized childcare, emergency family leave, because I'm learning that the people who work here aren't just employees. They're mothers and fathers and caregivers who are trying to build lives, not just careers. And this company should support that." More applause, louder this time. Isabella smiled, a careful, controlled expression that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Thank you for your patience during this process, and thank you for the work you do every day. That's all." She stepped down from the stage and was immediately surrounded by executives and assistants, creating a barrier of bodies between her and the crowd. Daniel watched as she disappeared back into the elevator, never once looking in his direction again. The lobby slowly emptied as people returned to work, buzzing with conversation about the announcement. Rick found Daniel by the pillar, his weathered face creased with a huge grin. "Can you believe it? We're safe. And better pay." He clapped Daniel on the shoulder. "Man, I thought we were done for. Whatever changed her mind, I'm grateful." "Yeah," Daniel said quietly. "Me too." But his mind was racing. The timing was too perfect. Friday night, she'd almost died. Monday afternoon, she'd reversed a decision that would have cost dozens of people their jobs. Monday afternoon, she'd announced an initiative that seemed designed specifically for people like him, single parents struggling to hold everything together. It couldn't be coincidence. Could it? The rest of the day passed in a blur. Daniel went through the motions of his job, but his thoughts kept circling back to the lobby, to Isabella's speech, to the question he couldn't quite answer. He picked up Marcus from the after-school program at 6, drove home through rush hour traffic, made dinner from whatever was left in the refrigerator. Mac and cheese from a box, cut up hot dogs, a side of frozen peas, the kind of meal that made him feel like he was failing at fatherhood, even as Marcus ate happily, telling stories about his day. After dinner, after homework, after the bedtime routine of teeth brushing and story reading, and the careful negotiation about how many more minutes before lights out, Daniel finally sat down on the small balcony of their third-floor apartment. The night was cool, clear, nothing like Friday's storm. The city hummed with distant traffic, and somewhere a dog was barking. His phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. Is this Daniel Hayes? His thumb hovered over the screen. He almost deleted it. Probably spam, probably a scam, but something made him respond. Who's asking? The reply came immediately. This is Isabella Laurent. I got your number from HR. I need to speak with you, tomorrow if possible. Not at the office. Can you meet me at Pike Place Market? 7 a.m., near the fish market entrance? Daniel stared at the screen for a long moment. Every instinct screamed at him to decline, to keep his distance, to maintain the careful boundaries between their worlds. But he remembered her voice in the rain. Thank you. You saved my life, and you don't even know me. He typed, I'll be there. The fish market at Pike Place was already busy when Daniel arrived the next morning, even before 7. Vendors were setting up their displays, arranging salmon and halibut on beds of ice, while seagulls wheeled overhead, screaming for scraps. Tourists with cameras jostled against locals with shopping bags, everyone drawn to the controlled chaos of Seattle's most famous market. Daniel spotted Isabella immediately, though she was clearly trying to be inconspicuous. She wore jeans, actual jeans, faded and worn, and a simple gray sweater under a black jacket. Her hair was down, falling in dark waves around her shoulders. No makeup, or at least very little. She looked younger like this, more uncertain, more human. She saw him and raised a hand in a small wave. They met near a coffee vendor, the smell of espresso cutting through the fishy brine of the market. Thank you for coming, she said. Her voice was different too, quieter, without the commanding edge he'd heard in the lobby yesterday. Can I buy you coffee? I'm okay. Please, I need something to do with my hands. She ordered 2 Americanos, and they walked toward the less crowded section of the market, past displays of flowers and local honey and handmade crafts. For a while, neither spoke. Daniel sipped his coffee and waited, letting her find whatever words she'd brought him here to say. Finally, she stopped near a railing that overlooked Elliott Bay. The morning sun was turning the water gold, and ferries cut white lines across the surface, heading to Bainbridge Island. I remember everything, Isabella said quietly, from Friday night, every detail. Daniel said nothing. I remember standing in the rain. I remember the car dying. I remember being so drunk and so angry and so tired that I didn't care anymore about anything. She turned to face him, and her gray eyes were bright with unshed tears. I remember stepping into the street, and I remember you pulling me back. You were in trouble. Anyone would have... No. Her voice was sharp now, cutting through his deflection. No, they wouldn't have. Most people would have driven past. Most people would have called 911 and kept going. Most people would have protected themselves and their kid instead of stopping for a stranger. She paused, composing herself. Especially a stranger who had just spent the morning explaining how she planned to fire people like you. So she did remember the meeting, had recognized him even in the rain and darkness. You took me home, Isabella continued. You made sure I was safe. You gave me water and opened windows and set out a trash can like I was someone worth taking care of. A tear escaped, tracked down her cheek. And then you left. Didn't ask for anything. Didn't take pictures or tell anyone or try to leverage what you'd seen. You just helped and left. Daniel watched a ferry disappear around the point. What did you want me to do? Blackmail you? Some people would have. I'm not some people. I know. She wiped at her eyes with the back of her hand, a gesture so unguarded it made her look almost childlike. That's why I had to find you, to say thank you properly, to explain why I was in that state, to— Her voice broke. To tell you that you saved more than my life Friday night. The story came out in fragments, pieces of a life that Daniel had never imagined existed behind the polished facade. Her father had died 6 months ago, the man who'd built Laurent Industries from nothing, who'd been her hero and her mentor, and the only person who'd truly understood her. Since his death, Isabella had thrown herself into work, trying to prove she could run the company as well as he had, trying to fill a void that work could never fill. Friday had been the anniversary of his death. 6 months exactly. I went to dinner alone, she said, at his favorite restaurant, drank his favorite wine, toasted to a ghost. Her laugh was bitter. Then I got in the car and started driving with no destination in mind. The car broke down, and I couldn't deal with it. Couldn't call my assistant or a tow truck or anyone who would look at me with pity. So I started walking and drinking from the bottle I'd taken from the restaurant. And at some point I stopped caring whether I made it across the street or not. Daniel felt something shift in his chest. The woman he'd saved wasn't some careless drunk. She was someone drowning in grief, reaching for any anchor in a storm. When you pulled me back, Isabella said, when you took care of me even though you had every reason not to, even though I'd never once acknowledged your existence, it broke something open, made me see what I'd become, who I'd forgotten to be. So the announcement yesterday, Daniel said slowly, the reversal on the layoffs, the new parent initiative, was because of you, because you showed me what real decency looks like, what it means to see people instead of just numbers on a spreadsheet. She turned to face him fully. My father used to say that a company's soul is in its people, that profit without purpose is just greed. I'd forgotten that. You reminded me. They stood in silence for a moment, watching the market come alive around them. A vendor started throwing fish, shouting to his coworker, drawing applause from tourists, life in all its messy, beautiful chaos. I don't want anything from you, Daniel said finally. If you're worried, I'm going to tell people or use this somehow. That's not why I asked you here. Isabella's voice was fierce again. I asked you here because I owe you my life, because I need you to know that what you did mattered, that it changed things, and because— She hesitated. Because I'd like to know you, the man who saved me, not as an employee, not as leverage, but as, I don't know, a person. Daniel's first instinct was to say no, to maintain the safe distance between their worlds, to go back to being invisible, to protect himself from whatever complications might come from letting someone like Isabella Laurent into his life. But then he thought about Marcus, about the single-parent initiative she'd announced, about the dozens of people in facilities who still had jobs because she'd changed her mind, about the fact that sometimes the right thing to do was also the scariest thing. Okay, he said, but not here, not in your world. If you want to know me, it has to be in mine. Something flickered across Isabella's face, surprise maybe, or respect. She nodded. Where? There's a garage, Northside Auto in Ballard. I help out there sometimes on weekends, fixing cars for people who can't afford dealer prices. This Saturday, 1 p.m. If you show up, we'll talk. If you don't, we go back to how things were. I'll be there, she said immediately. We'll see. He turned to leave, but she caught his arm. The same gesture he'd used to pull her from the street, now reversed. Daniel. It was the first time she'd used his first name. Thank you for everything. He nodded once, then walked away through the market, leaving her standing by the railing with the sun rising behind her and the city waking up around them both. Saturday arrived gray and drizzly, typical Seattle fall weather. Daniel spent the morning with Marcus, making pancakes and watching cartoons, trying not to think about whether Isabella would actually show up at the garage. Part of him hoped she wouldn't. It would be easier that way, safer, less complicated. But another part, the part that had seen genuine pain in her eyes at the market, that recognized grief when he saw it, hoped she'd come. At noon, he dropped Marcus off at a friend's house for a play date, then drove to Northside Auto. The garage was owned by Jimmy Chen, a 60-year-old former Marine who'd given Daniel a part-time gig 3 years ago when he'd been desperate for extra cash. These days, Daniel worked Saturdays when he could, helping people who were scraping by, who needed their cars fixed but couldn't afford the markup at professional shops. Today, they had two jobs lined up, a Honda Accord with a failing alternator and a Ford pickup with brake issues. Daniel changed into coveralls and got to work on the Accord, losing himself in the familiar rhythm of diagnosis and repair. At 12:45, he was under the car, wrestling with a corroded bolt, when he heard the garage door open. Footsteps approached, and Jimmy's voice called out, "Hayes, you got a visitor!" Daniel rolled out from under the car, wiping grease from his hands. And there she was. Isabella Laurent stood in the doorway of the garage, wearing jeans and a simple blue t-shirt, her hair pulled back in a ponytail. She looked completely out of place among the oil stains and spare parts, but she didn't look uncomfortable, just uncertain. "You came," Daniel said. "I said I would." Most people don't mean it when they say things like that. I'm not most people. A small smile, though I'm learning that's not always something to be proud of. Jimmy was watching this exchange with undisguised curiosity, his eyes moving between Daniel and this clearly expensive woman who'd walked into his garage. "This is Isabella," Daniel said. "She's going to help out today." "Help out?" Jimmy raised an eyebrow. "She know her way around an engine?" "Not yet," Isabella said, "but I'm a fast learner." For the next 4 hours, Daniel taught Isabella Laurent, Billionaire CEO, Harvard MBA, Master of Boardrooms and Corporate Strategy, how to change brake pads on a 2008 Ford F-150. She listened intently as he explained the process, asking questions that showed she was actually trying to understand, not just going through the motions. When he handed her a wrench and told her to remove the caliper bolts, she did it without hesitation, even when her hand slipped and she scraped her knuckles on the metal. "You okay?" Daniel asked. She looked at the small cut, the bead of blood forming on her skin, and laughed. Actually laughed. "Yeah, just not used to bleeding at work." "Welcome to my world." They worked side by side, Daniel guiding her through each step while Jimmy handled the Accord. She made mistakes, stripped a bolt, dropped a socket into an unreachable crevice, spilled brake fluid on her shoes. But she didn't complain, didn't ask to stop, didn't pull out her phone to check messages even once. And somewhere in the middle of it all, they started talking. Not about work or companies or the vast differences between their lives. Just talking. About small things. The Seahawks' chances this season? The best coffee shops in different neighborhoods? Books they'd read? Movies they'd seen? The weather? The city? The ordinary stuff that normal people discussed. "Tell me about your son," Isabella said at one point, while they were waiting for a part to soak in penetrating oil. Daniel felt his usual defensiveness kick in, the instinct to keep Marcus separate from everything else, to protect him from being used or judged or pitied. But when he looked at Isabella, covered in grease and genuinely curious, something in him relaxed. His name's Marcus. He's 6. Loves dinosaurs and building things with Legos and asking approximately 9,000 questions a day. Daniel couldn't help smiling. "He's the best thing that ever happened to me." "What about his mother?" "She left when he was 8 months old. Said she wasn't ready to be a parent, that she'd made a mistake." Daniel's voice was matter-of-fact, years of practice making the words almost emotionless. "Haven't heard from her since? It's just been me and Marcus." Isabella was quiet for a moment. "That must be incredibly hard." "It's incredibly worth it." He met her eyes. "Every struggle, every sacrifice, every moment of exhaustion, it's worth it because he's worth it. He's the reason I get up every morning, the reason I work 2 jobs, the reason I can't afford to fail." "The reason you stopped that night," Isabella said softly. "Even though you had him in the car, even though it was dangerous. I stopped because it was the right thing to do. And because I want Marcus to grow up knowing that when someone needs help, you help. Even when it's inconvenient. Even when it's scary. He's lucky to have you as a father." Daniel shrugged, uncomfortable with the praise. "I'm doing the best I can." They went back to work, but the atmosphere had shifted. Something had opened up between them. Some barrier dissolved in grease and honest conversation. By 5 o'clock, the truck was done. The Accord was purring smoothly, and both Daniel and Isabella were filthy. She had grease on her face, oil under her nails, and her jeans were streaked with brake dust. She looked happy. "So, Daniel said as they cleaned up. Still want to get to know the real me? Still think this is interesting? Isabella dried her hands on a shop towel, considering the question seriously. This was the most honest afternoon I've had in years. So yes, if you'll let me, I'd like to do this again. Why? The question came out sharper than he intended. You've got your own world, Isabella, galas and board meetings and whatever it is billionaires do. Why would you want to spend Saturdays in a garage in Ballard? She looked at him for a long moment before answering. Because in that world, everyone wants something from me. Everyone has an agenda. Everyone sees the company or the money or the connections, never just me. Her voice dropped. But here, with you, I'm just Isabella. Someone who doesn't know how to change brake pads but wants to learn. Someone who can make mistakes and laugh about it. Someone who feels real for the first time in months. Daniel wanted to warn her off, wanted to explain that this couldn't work, that their worlds were too different, that she was setting herself up for disappointment. But he saw the honesty in her eyes, the vulnerability that she was offering like a gift. Next Saturday, he heard himself say. Same time. We've got a Subaru with a transmission issue. It'll be messy. Her smile was like sunrise. I'll be here. She showed up the following Saturday. And the Saturday after that. And the one after that, until the weeks began to blur together into a pattern that felt both natural and impossible at the same time. Isabella Laurent, who commanded boardrooms and signed contracts worth millions, spent her weekends in coveralls learning to diagnose engine problems and replace worn suspension components. She showed up on time, worked without complaint, and never once pulled rank or reminded anyone who she really was. Jimmy Chen watched this transformation with the kind of amusement that came from seeing something he'd never expected to witness in his lifetime. Your rich friend's getting good, he said to Daniel one afternoon in late October, while Isabella was under a Mazda replacing an oil pan gasket. Give her another month and she'll be better than half the mechanics I know. She's not my friend, Daniel said automatically, though the words felt hollow even as he spoke them. Sure she's not. Jimmy's grin was knowing. That why she brings coffee for everyone now? That why she stayed 3 hours late last week to help you finish that transmission rebuild? That why she looks at you like you hung the moon? Daniel didn't have an answer for that, so he focused on the brake job in front of him and pretended he hadn't heard. But the truth was becoming harder to ignore. Something was shifting between them, deepening in ways that scared him more than he wanted to admit. It started small. Isabella remembering how he took his coffee. Daniel noticing which tools she preferred, the comfortable silence that developed when they worked side by side. Then it grew into longer conversations during breaks, sharing lunch from the taco truck that parked outside the garage, talking about everything and nothing. She told him about growing up as an only child in a household where dinner conversation revolved around quarterly earnings and market share, about boarding schools in Switzerland and summers at the family estate in the Hamptons, about the pressure of being groomed from birth to take over an empire, of never being allowed to just be a kid. I had everything, she said one day, sitting on an overturned bucket while eating fish tacos. Every material thing anyone could want, but I didn't have what you're giving Marcus. I didn't have a parent who came to school, plays, or helped with homework, or knew my favorite dinosaur. What is his favorite dinosaur? Daniel asked. Parasaurolophus, the one with the crest on its head that made sounds. She smiled at his surprise. You mentioned it 3 weeks ago. I looked it up. He told her about his own childhood in Spokane, about a father who worked construction and a mother who cleaned houses, both grinding themselves down to give their son a chance at something better. About the partial scholarship to community college that evaporated when his father got sick, the student loans he'd never finished paying off, the business degree he was still chipping away at online, 1 class per semester when he could afford it. I thought I'd be further along by now, he admitted. Thought I'd have a real career, a house, stability. Instead, I'm 32 and still living paycheck to paycheck, still one emergency away from losing everything. But you have Marcus, Isabella said quietly, and he has you. That's not nothing, Daniel. That's everything. The words hung between them, heavy with meaning neither of them was quite ready to examine. By November, Isabella had become a fixture at the garage. She knew the regular customers by name, joked with Jimmy about the Mariners' disappointing season, and had developed a surprising talent for electrical diagnostics. She also started bringing Marcus with her sometimes. when Daniel couldn't find childcare for Saturday afternoons. The first time Marcus met Isabella, Daniel had been nervous in a way he couldn't quite articulate. His son was the most important person in his world, and introducing him to someone felt like opening a door he'd kept carefully locked for years. "Marcus, this is Isabella," he'd said, watching his son's face carefully. "She helps out here at the garage sometimes." Marcus had looked up at her with his huge brown eyes, so much like Daniel's, and asked with the blunt honesty of a 6-year-old, "Are you my dad's girlfriend?" Isabella had frozen, a socket wrench still in her hand, clearly unsure how to answer. Daniel's face had gone hot. "She's a friend, buddy. Just a friend who likes working on cars." "Oh." Marcus had seemed to accept this. "Can you help me with my Lego Millennium Falcon? Dad says we'll build it together, but he's always tired." And just like that, Isabella Laurent, who probably had a dozen important meetings she could have been attending, sat down on the garage floor with a 6-year-old and helped build a Lego spaceship for 2 hours while Daniel worked on a Honda's timing belt. He'd watched them from across the garage, his hands moving on autopilot while his mind struggled to process the image. Marcus explaining the intricacies of Star Wars lore with the passionate intensity that only small children could muster. Isabella listening with genuine interest, asking questions, laughing at his jokes, treating him like a person whose opinions mattered. When Marcus had to use the bathroom, Isabella had come over to where Daniel was working, her eyes bright with something that looked dangerously close to tears. "He's amazing," she'd said softly. "You've raised an incredible kid, Daniel. I'm just trying not to screw him up too badly. You're doing more than that. You're teaching him how to be kind, how to work hard, how to see people." She paused. "How to be the kind of man who stops in the rain to help a stranger." After that, Marcus became part of their Saturday routine. He'd do his homework in the garage office or help in small ways, handing them tools, organizing parts, drawing pictures of the cars they were fixing. And Isabella treated him with the same genuine care she showed everything else in this new world she'd entered. One Saturday in mid-November, Daniel arrived at the garage to find Isabella already there. But something was off. She was sitting in her car in the parking lot, hands gripping the steering wheel, staring straight ahead. When he knocked on the window, she startled like she'd been somewhere far away. "You okay?" he asked when she rolled down the window. "Board meeting yesterday. They want to expand into Asian markets. Aggressive timeline, huge investment, my father's old business partners all telling me it's what he would have wanted." She laughed, but there was no humor in it. How would they know what he would have wanted? They barely knew him. Daniel opened the car door. "Come on, let's go break something." "What?" "There's a junker out back that's getting scrapped next week. Sometimes when things get heavy, the best therapy is taking a sledgehammer to something that's already broken." 20 minutes later, Isabella Laurent was attacking a rusted-out Oldsmobile with a sledgehammer, each swing releasing months of pent-up frustration and grief. Daniel stood back, letting her work through it, only stepping in when she finally dropped the hammer and bent over, hands on her knees, breathing hard. "Better?" he asked. "I miss him so much," she said, and her voice cracked. "Everyone tells me to move on, to focus on the company, to be the leader he trained me to be, but I just want my father back. I want to ask him what to do. I want him to tell me I'm making the right choices." Daniel didn't offer platitudes or empty comfort. He just stood there while she cried, and when she finally straightened up, he handed her a bottle of water and said, "He'd be proud of you. You didn't know him. I know you. And I know that anyone who raised someone capable of changing her entire worldview after one night in the rain, who shows up every weekend to learn about brake systems even though she could be doing anything else, who sits on a garage floor building Legos with a 6-year-old. Anyone who raised that person did something right." Isabella looked at him for a long moment. Mascara streaked down her cheeks, her expensive workout clothes covered in rust and dirt. Then she stepped forward and hugged him. It was the first time they'd touched since that night in the rain. Daniel's arms came up automatically, holding her while she trembled against his chest, and something inside him shifted irrevocably. This wasn't just about helping someone anymore. This wasn't just about being kind or doing the right thing. This was something else entirely. They stood like that for a while, surrounded by junked cars and the smell of motor oil, until Isabella finally pulled back. "Thank you," she said, "for this. For all of it. For giving me a place where I can fall apart without the whole world watching. Any time, Daniel said, and meant it. The Saturday before Thanksgiving, Isabella arrived at the garage with news that made Daniel's stomach drop. I need to tell you something, she said, and her tone was serious enough that Jimmy made himself scarce, suddenly very interested in inventory in the back room. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. Actually, something's very right. She took a breath. I've been working on the Parent Support Initiative, really working on it, not just as a PR thing, and I want to announce it properly, make it something meaningful. So I'm planning an event at the company headquarters in 2 weeks. A launch party, but also a genuine gathering for employees and their families. I want people to understand what we're building and why it matters. That's great, Daniel said, confused about why she looked so nervous. I want you there. I want to recognize you publicly for inspiring the program. To tell people that a single father who works in facilities showed me what true dedication looks like. The words hit Daniel like a punch to the gut. No. Daniel? No, absolutely not. He stepped back, putting physical distance between them. You can't do that. You can't put me in front of everyone and make me some kind of poster child for struggling parents. That's not who I am. That's exactly who you are. And there's no shame in it. It's not about shame, it's about boundaries. His voice was rising now, months of anxiety finally finding an outlet. It's about the fact that you and I exist in different worlds, and mixing them together is dangerous. For me, for Marcus, for everything I've built. What are you talking about? We've been mixing them for months. In here, Daniel gestured around the garage, in this space that's separate from everything else. But you're talking about putting me on display at your company, in front of people who already see me as lesser, telling them that I inspired you. Do you know what that will do? Do you understand how that will change things? Isabella's face had gone pale. I thought you'd be proud. I thought this was a chance to show people that the work you do matters. The work I do does matter, but it matters in the basement, in the mechanical rooms, in the places where no one has to think about it. The second you shine a spotlight on me, I become a story, a lesson. The poor single dad who taught the rich CEO about humanity. He laughed bitterly. That's not a gift, Isabella. That's exposure. And exposure is the last thing someone like me can afford. Someone like you? What does that even mean? It means I'm invisible for a reason. It means I can't afford to have people asking questions about my life, about Marcus, about why a 32-year-old guy with a partial degree is working as a maintenance tech. It means I survive by not being noticed. But you deserve to be noticed. You deserve recognition for being an incredible father and a good man. And what? Daniel's voice dropped to something dangerous. And someone you've been spending every weekend with. Someone you cry in front of and hug and look at like... He stopped himself. You're not thinking about me, Isabella. You're thinking about the story you want to tell about yourself. About how you learned and changed and became a better person. And I'm just the supporting character in that narrative. The words landed like stones. Isabella flinched as if he'd struck her. That's not fair, she said quietly. Maybe not, but it's true. They stared at each other across the garage bay, the space between them suddenly vast. All the easy warmth of the past months had evaporated, replaced by the cold reality of class and power and the unbridgeable distance between their lives. I should go, Isabella said finally. Her voice was hollow. Yeah, you should. She turned and walked toward her car, not the Mercedes from that night, but a newer model that probably cost more than 3 years of Daniel's salary. She paused with her hand on the door handle, looked back. For what it's worth, you're wrong. This was never about my story. It was about honoring someone who changed my life. But I understand why you can't see it that way. I understand that I'm still just the woman in the tower, and you're still just trying to survive. That's all either of us has ever been, Daniel said. She nodded once, got in her car, and drove away. Daniel stood in the empty garage for a long time after she left, the afternoon suddenly cold despite the space heaters running in the corners. Jimmy emerged from the back room, took one look at Daniel's face, and wisely said nothing. That night, Marcus asked where Isabella was. She had other things to do, buddy. But she's coming back next week, right? We were going to teach her about the do-back. I don't think so. Why not? Did you have a fight? Daniel looked at his son, at those wide, trusting eyes that assumed the best of people, and felt something break inside his chest. "Yeah, we had a fight. You should say sorry. That's what you always tell me to do when I fight with my friends." "It's more complicated than that." "Why?" "Because sometimes grown-ups hurt each other in ways that sorry can't fix." Marcus considered this with the seriousness of someone trying to understand a world that didn't make sense. "I liked her. She was nice to me. And she made you smile more." "I know, buddy. I liked her too." The Laurent Industries headquarters building glowed against the December night sky, every window lit up for the Parent Support Initiative launch party. Daniel drove past it on his way home from work, saw the valets in the circular drive, the well-dressed people streaming through the doors, the banners announcing the new program. He'd been invited, of course. A formal invitation had arrived at his apartment 2 weeks ago, thick cardstock in a cream envelope with his name written in elegant calligraphy. He'd thrown it away without opening it, but he'd heard about the event anyway. It was all anyone at work could talk about. The free childcare being provided during the party, the food, the chance to mingle with executives. Rick had tried to convince Daniel to come. "Man, you should be there. You're exactly who this program is for. Single dad, working your ass off, trying to give your kid a better life. They're giving out grants for education, for emergency funds. You could use that." "I'm good," Daniel had said. "You're an idiot," Rick had replied, but he'd said it with affection. Now driving past the gleaming tower, Daniel wondered if he'd made the right choice. Wondered if pride and fear had cost him something valuable. Wondered if Isabella was in there right now, giving her speech, telling people about the importance of supporting working parents without mentioning the man who'd inspired it all. He went home, paid the babysitter, checked on Marcus sleeping peacefully in his small bedroom, and sat on the balcony with a beer he couldn't really afford. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number, but he knew before opening it who it would be. The message was a photo. Isabella on a small stage, speaking into a microphone. Behind her, a massive screen showing a presentation slide. The slide read, "The Parent Support Initiative, investing in the people who build our future." Below the photo, a message. "You're not here, but your impact is everywhere. Thank you for teaching me to see what matters. I hope someday you'll forgive me for wanting to share that lesson." Daniel stared at the photo for a long time. Isabella looked tired but determined, her gray eyes fixed on something beyond the camera. She was back in her armor, the perfect suit, the professional demeanor, the CEO who commanded rooms. But he could see the strain around her eyes, the weight she carried that no one else would notice. He typed and deleted 3 different responses before finally settling on, "I hope it goes well." 3 dots appeared indicating she was typing. They pulsed for a long moment, then disappeared. No response came. Daniel finished his beer and went inside. The weeks that followed were strange. Daniel settled back into his normal routine. Work, pick up Marcus, dinner, homework, bedtime, repeat. Weekends were quieter now without the garage work, and he told himself that was fine. Told himself that the ache he felt was just adjustment, just his life returning to its natural shape. But Marcus noticed. Of course Marcus noticed. "Are we going to see Isabella for Christmas?" he asked one evening in mid-December while they decorated their small artificial tree with ornaments collected over the years. "Probably not, buddy." "Why not? Did she do something bad?" "No, she didn't do anything bad. We're from different worlds, and sometimes those worlds don't fit together." "That's dumb. Worlds can fit together if people want them to." Daniel hung a handmade ornament Marcus had created in kindergarten, a popsicle stick snowman with a crooked smile. "It's not always that simple." "You're being dumb, Dad." "Hey, watch the attitude." But Marcus's words echoed in his head long after his son had gone to bed. Worlds can fit together if people want them to. As if wanting was enough. As if the distance between a maintenance worker and a billionaire CEO could be bridged by simple desire. 2 days before Christmas, Daniel was in the basement mechanical room running diagnostics on the HVAC system when his radio crackled. "Hayes, you got a visitor. Main lobby. Tell them I'm busy." "She says it's important. Says her name is Isabella Laurent." Daniel's hand stilled on the control panel. "I'll be right up." He took the service elevator to the ground floor, acutely aware of his work clothes, the grease on his hands, the sweat from working in the hot mechanical room. The lobby was nearly empty. Most people had already left for the holiday, the building running on skeleton crew. Isabella stood near the security desk, looking small and out of place despite being in her own building. She wore a long black coat over dark pants, her hair down around her shoulders. No makeup that he could see. She looked like she hadn't slept in days. "Hey," she said when she saw him. "Hey." They stood there awkwardly, surrounded by marble and chrome and the ghost of their last conversation. "Can we talk?" Isabella asked. "Please? Just for a few minutes." Daniel nodded and led her to a small conference room off the lobby. The space was impersonal. Glass walls, a table, chairs, nothing that belonged to anyone. They sat across from each other, and the distance felt both too close and impossibly far. "I owe you an apology," Isabella said. "You were right. About the event, about me making you into a story, about all of it. I got so caught up in wanting to do something meaningful that I forgot to consider what you actually needed. I'm sorry." Daniel had spent weeks preparing for this conversation in his head, but now that it was happening, all his practiced words disappeared. "I'm sorry too," he said, "for what I said about you only caring about your own narrative. That wasn't fair. I know you better than that." "Do you?" Her smile was sad. "Because I'm not sure I know myself anymore. I used to be so certain about who I was and what I wanted. Then you pulled me out of the rain and everything shifted. The person I was before doesn't fit anymore, but I don't know who I'm supposed to be instead. You're supposed to be whoever you choose to be." "What if I choose to be someone who spends Saturdays in a garage? Someone who cares more about building Legos with a 6-year-old than attending charity galas? What if the life I'm supposed to have isn't the life I actually want?" The question hung between them, heavy with implications neither of them could ignore. "Isabella, I know all the reasons why this can't work. Different worlds, different lives, too complicated, too risky. I've listed them all in my head 1,000 times. But Daniel, I can't stop thinking about you, about Marcus, about the way I feel when I'm covered in engine grease and laughing about a stripped bolt. That's the most real I've ever felt." Daniel's throat was tight. "You can't build a life around Saturday afternoons in a garage. That's not sustainable." "Why not? Why can't I have this? Why does my life have to be only board meetings and profit margins and living up to my father's legacy? Why can't I choose something different?" "Because choice is a luxury, Isabella. You think I chose to be a single father working 2 jobs? You think I chose to live paycheck to paycheck, to worry constantly about whether I'm giving my son enough? I do what I have to do to survive. But you could do anything. You could have anyone. Why would you choose this?" "Because I love you." The words hit Daniel like lightning. Isabella's eyes were bright with tears, her hands clenched together on the table. "I love you," she repeated. "I love your kindness and your dedication and the way you see people. I love how you are with Marcus, how you work without complaint, how you stopped in the rain even when you had every reason not to. I love the man you are when no one's watching. And I know that's not fair to you, that it's not what you asked for, but I needed to say it out loud at least once." Daniel couldn't breathe. The words he'd been holding back for months pushed against his chest, demanding release. "You can't," he said, and his voice was rough. "Isabella, you can't love me. It doesn't work that way. Love doesn't bridge the gap between what we are." "Why not?" "Because I have nothing to offer you. Because eventually you'll wake up and realize that what you actually love is the idea of being different, of slumming it in the real world. Because when the novelty wears off, you'll go back to your life and I'll be left trying to explain to my son why another person he cared about disappeared. That's not who I am. Maybe not today. But you're grieving, Isabella. You're lost and looking for something to hold on to. And I can't be that for you. Because when you find your way again, when you remember who you're supposed to be, I'll just be the maintenance guy who was there when you needed saving." Tears spilled down her cheeks now. "Is that really what you think? That this is just about grief? About some temporary rebellion? I think you're 30 years old and running a billion-dollar company, and you have responsibilities that don't include fixing cars in Ballard. I think eventually reality is going to reassert itself, and I think when it does, you and I won't make sense anymore. And if you're wrong, if this isn't temporary, if I actually want to build something with you." Daniel stood up, putting distance between them, because sitting this close while she said these things was unbearable. Then I'd tell you that I'm terrified, that I haven't let anyone close since Marcus's mother left, because I can't risk him getting hurt again. That the idea of you being part of our lives is both the best and worst thing I can imagine. He turned to face her. And I'd tell you that despite all my better judgment, despite every logical reason why this is a terrible idea, I fell for you too. Somewhere between teaching you about brake systems and watching you build Legos with my son, I fell completely for you. Isabella was on her feet now, closing the distance between them. Then why are we fighting this? Her voice was barely a whisper. Because love isn't enough, Isabella. Love doesn't pay rent or feed a kid or survive the reality of two people from completely different worlds trying to make something work. So we give up? We just walk away from this because it's hard? We walk away because one of us has to be smart enough to see where this ends. They stood inches apart, both breathing hard, both crying now. Daniel wanted nothing more than to pull her close, to let himself believe that wanting could be enough. But he'd learned years ago that the world didn't work that way. I should go, he said. Daniel, please. Merry Christmas, Isabella. I hope you find what you're looking for. He walked out of the conference room, through the lobby, back to the service elevator. He didn't look back, because if he looked back, he'd see her standing there with tears on her face, and he'd lose what little resolve he had left. The elevator doors closed, and Daniel leaned against the wall, letting his own tears fall in the privacy of the descending car. Sometimes love wasn't enough. Sometimes the bravest thing you could do was walk away. If you or someone you know is having a difficult time, free support is available. Find resources. Christmas came and went in a blur of forced cheerfulness and hollow traditions. Daniel bought Marcus the Lego set he'd been asking for, a Star Destroyer that cost more than Daniel wanted to spend, but less than his son deserved. They built it together on Christmas morning while snow fell softly outside their apartment window, the first real snow Seattle had seen in years. Marcus chattered excitedly about the different sections of the ship, about how this piece connected to that one, about the tiny minifigures that came with the set. Daniel made the appropriate responses, smiled at the right moments, but part of him was somewhere else. Part of him was in a conference room 2 days ago, watching tears run down Isabella's face while he walked away from the only woman who'd made him feel something real in years. Dad, you're not paying attention, Marcus said, his small hands on his hips in a gesture so like Daniel's own that it made his chest ache. Sorry, buddy. Show me again. They finished the Star Destroyer by early afternoon. Marcus placed it carefully on his bookshelf, arranging it just so among his other treasures, and then turned to his father with an expression that was far too serious for a 6-year-old. Are you sad because of Isabella? Daniel's hand stilled on the wrapping paper he was collecting. What makes you think that? Because you get this look on your face when you're thinking about her, like you're happy and sad at the same time. And you've had that look a lot since she stopped coming to the garage. I'm okay, Marcus, just tired from work. You're lying. There was no accusation in his voice, just matter-of-fact observation. You told me lying is wrong, even when the truth is hard. Daniel sat down on the floor beside his son, surrounded by torn wrapping paper and the debris of Christmas morning. You're right, I'm sorry. Yes, I'm sad about Isabella. We had a disagreement, and I don't think we're going to see her anymore. Because she's rich and we're not? The bluntness of it knocked the air from Daniel's lungs. Who told you that? Nobody told me. I'm not dumb, Dad. I see things. I know our apartment is small and other kids have bigger houses. I know you work all the time and you're always worried about money. I know Isabella lives in that huge place we drove to that one time. Marcus picked at a piece of tape stuck to his jeans. I thought maybe she liked us anyway, but I guess being rich means you can't be friends with people who aren't. That's not what this is about, buddy. It's more complicated than rich and not rich. Everything is always more complicated with grown-ups. Marcus's voice held a note of frustration. But it seems pretty simple to me. You like her. She likes you. So why can't you just be together? Because sometimes liking each other isn't enough. Sometimes the world gets in the way. Then the world is stupid. Daniel pulled his son into a hug, breathing in the scent of his shampoo, feeling the solid warmth of him. Yeah, sometimes it really is. They spent the rest of Christmas Day watching movies and eating too much pizza, and Daniel tried to convince himself that this was enough. that his son's laughter and the snow falling outside and the quiet safety of their small apartment could fill the hollow space that had opened up inside him. It almost worked. The week between Christmas and New Year's passed in a strange, suspended state. The Laurent Industries building operated on minimal staff, most people taking vacation time, and Daniel found himself with more quiet hours than usual. He worked alone in the mechanical rooms, performing routine maintenance and small repairs, grateful for the solitude. On December 30th, he was replacing filters in the air handling unit on the 40th floor when his radio crackled. "Hayes, got a situation on 42, some kind of leak in the executive suite. Can you check it out?" Daniel's stomach tightened. The 42nd floor, Isabella's floor. "Can't Rick handle it?" "Rick's off until Monday. You're it." Daniel grabbed his tool bag and took the elevator up, hoping against reason that Isabella wouldn't be there, that she'd be on vacation somewhere warm, somewhere far from Seattle and the building and him. The elevator doors opened onto plush carpet and floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a view of the entire city spread out below. The executive suite was quiet, most offices dark, but light spilled from one door at the end of the hallway, the corner office that had belonged to Isabella's father that now belonged to her. Water was pooling in the hallway outside her door, seeping out from under the frame. Daniel knocked once, then twice. No answer. He tried the handle, unlocked, and pushed the door open. The office was massive, dominated by a curved desk that faced the windows and the city beyond. Water was streaming from a ceiling panel near the interior wall, pouring down onto elegant hardwood floors, soaking into what looked like a very expensive rug. And sitting on the floor beneath the leak, knees pulled to her chest, completely soaked, was Isabella. She looked up when he entered, and Daniel saw that her face was streaked with tears. "Hey," he said softly, setting down his tool bag. "You've got a leak." "I know." Her voice was hollow. "It started an hour ago. I called facilities, but then I realized you might come, and I didn't know if I could handle seeing you, and I was going to call back and cancel, but then I just sat here." Daniel moved quickly, shutting off the water supply to the affected pipe, then climbing on a chair to examine the ceiling panel. A connector had failed, probably from age and pressure. Simple fix, 15 minutes of work. But Isabella was still sitting on the floor, water dripping into her hair, and nothing about this felt simple. "You should move," he said. "You're getting soaked." "I don't care." Daniel climbed down, grabbed a stack of towels from her private bathroom, and started spreading them around the leak to soak up the water. Isabella watched him work with eyes that looked bruised with exhaustion. "Why are you here?" he asked. "It's almost New Year's Eve. You should be somewhere else." "Where should I be?" "At some party, pretending to enjoy champagne and small talk? At my empty mansion, counting down to midnight alone?" She laughed, but it was a broken sound. "This is the only place that makes sense anymore. My father's office, his desk, the last place I felt like I knew who I was supposed to be." Daniel knelt down beside her, not caring that the water was soaking through his work pants. "Isabella, do you know what day it is? What day it really is?" She looked at him, and her eyes were devastated. "It's the 6-month anniversary of the last conversation I had with my father. We fought. I wanted to make changes to the company structure, modernize some of his old practices. He told me I didn't understand the business, that I was too young, too impulsive. I said he was stuck in the past. We both said things we regretted. I'm sure he knew you didn't mean he died the next day. Massive heart attack at his desk. And the last words I said to him were that he needed to let go and trust me." Tears were flowing freely now, mixing with the water dripping from her hair. "I never got to take them back. Never got to tell him I was scared, that I just wanted him to see me as capable, that I loved him." Daniel's hand found hers on the wet floor, their fingers tangling together. "6 months ago today, I lost my father. 6 months and 1 week ago, I almost died in the rain and you saved me. And for a little while, when I was learning about brake systems and building Legos with Marcus and pretending to be someone normal, I forgot how much everything hurt." She squeezed his hand hard enough that it almost hurt. "But then you walked away, and it all came back. Every bit of pain I'd been running from." "I walked away because I was scared," Daniel said quietly. "Because letting you in meant risking everything, and I didn't think I could survive losing you. But you lost me anyway. We lost each other. So what did walking away actually protect?" The question hung between them, unanswerable. Daniel tightened his grip on her hand. Come on, let's get you dried off. He helped her to her feet, guided her to the bathroom, handed her towels. She dried her hair mechanically, changed into a spare shirt she had hanging in the closet, one of those crisp white button-downs that probably cost more than Daniel's weekly grocery budget. When she emerged, she looked more composed, but her eyes were still red-rimmed and lost. I'll finish fixing the leak, Daniel said. Then I'll clean up the water. You should go home. I don't want to go home. Home is just another place where I'm alone with everything I've lost. Then where do you want to be? Anywhere but here. Anywhere that doesn't remind me of who I'm supposed to be and how badly I'm failing at it. Daniel made a decision that his rational brain screamed was a mistake. My shift ends in an hour. Marcus is at a sleepover. I was just going to go home and watch the ball drop on TV alone. But if you want, you could come with me. Order takeout, watch something stupid, just exist for a few hours without having to be anyone in particular. Isabella stared at him. Are you serious? Probably not, but the offer stands. She was quiet for a long moment, and Daniel could see her weighing it. The risk, the complication, the impossibility of what he was suggesting. Then she nodded. Okay, yes, I'd like that. An hour later, they sat on Daniel's worn couch, eating Thai food from containers and watching a cooking competition show that neither of them cared about. The apartment was warm, the radiator clanking occasionally, the sound of someone's TV filtering through the thin walls. It was about as far from Isabella's world as you could get, but she seemed to relax into it, curling up in the corner of the couch with her pad thai and laughing at the contestants' dramatic declarations about their desserts. This is ridiculous, she said. Who gets that upset about a soufflé? Someone who really cares about soufflés, apparently. They fell into easy conversation, the kind they'd developed at the garage. No agenda, no weight, just two people talking. Isabella told him about the board meeting where one of her father's old partners had suggested she was too emotional to run the company effectively. Daniel told her about the time Marcus had tried to fix the kitchen sink himself and flooded half the apartment. He's just like you, Isabella said. Wants to fix things, make them work. Yeah, well, sometimes things can't be fixed. Sometimes they're just broken. Isabella set down her food and turned to face him fully. Is that what you think we are? Broken beyond repair? I think we're two people who want something we can't have. Why can't we have it? And don't give me the speech about different worlds again, Daniel. We're both sitting here right now, eating takeout on a couch that's seen better days, and it feels more real than anything I've experienced in months. So tell me the real reason. Not the safe reason. The true one. Daniel set his own food aside, ran his hands through his hair. Because I'm terrified. Because the last time I let someone in, let myself believe that maybe I could have something good, she left and took part of my soul with her. Because Marcus asks about you constantly, and I see the hope in his eyes, and I know that if you and I try this and it falls apart, it won't just break me, it'll break him too. So the real reason is fear. Fear is a pretty good reason. It's also a prison. Isabella moved closer, close enough that Daniel could see the flecks of darker gray in her eyes. I'm scared too. Terrified, actually. I've never felt this way about anyone, never wanted something this badly outside of work and achievement and all the safe things I could control. You make me want to be someone different, someone better. And that's terrifying because what if I can't be that person? What if I disappoint you? You couldn't disappoint me, Isabella. You don't know that. You don't know what it's like living in my head, dealing with the pressure and the expectations and the constant voice telling me I'm not good enough, that I'll never be as good as my father, that I'm going to fail everyone who depends on me. Daniel reached out, cupped her face in his hand. I know exactly what that's like. I live with that voice every single day. Every time Marcus needs something I can't afford. Every time I have to choose between paying rent on time or fixing the car. Every time I look at my half-finished degree and wonder if I'll ever be more than what I am right now. But you keep going. You don't give up. Because I have to. Because Marcus needs me to. But if I just had myself to worry about, Daniel's voice dropped. I don't know if I'd have the strength. They sat there for a moment, foreheads touching, breathing the same air. Then Isabella closed the distance and kissed him. It wasn't like the movies. No swelling music, no perfect choreography. It was tentative and scared and real. Daniel's hand slid into her hair, still slightly damp from the leak in her office. Her hands found his chest, feeling his heartbeat through his shirt. They kissed like people who'd been drowning and finally found air. When they pulled apart, both were breathing hard. "We shouldn't do this," Daniel whispered. "I know. It's going to be complicated. Everything worthwhile is complicated." Isabella, stop. Just stop talking and kiss me again. So he did. And for the first time in months, the voice in his head that said he wasn't good enough, wasn't deserving, wasn't anything special, that voice went quiet. They stayed up until midnight, talking and kissing and figuring out what this thing between them might actually look like, if they were brave enough to try. When the TV showed the ball dropping in Times Square and the new year officially began, they were tangled together on the couch, Isabella's head on Daniel's chest, his fingers tracing patterns on her arm. "Resolution time," Isabella said. "What's yours?" "Don't have one. Never saw the point in making promises I probably can't keep. Come on. Everyone has something they want to change about their life." Daniel was quiet for a moment, thinking. "I want to stop being so scared. Want to believe that maybe I can have something good without it being taken away." "That's a good one." Isabella tilted her head to look up at him. "Mine is to stop running. Stop hiding from grief and fear and all the hard feelings by burying myself in work. To actually live instead of just surviving. Think we can manage that?" "I don't know, but I think we have a better chance together than apart." They fell asleep there on the couch, neither wanting to move, neither wanting to risk breaking the fragile peace they'd found. When Daniel woke just after dawn, stiff and uncomfortable, Isabella was still curled against him, her breathing slow and even. In sleep, the tension was gone from her face, the weight of expectation lifted. She looked younger, softer, at peace. He carefully extracted himself, covered her with a blanket, and went to make coffee. The morning was cold and clear, frost on the windows. The city quiet in that particular way of New Year's Day when everyone was sleeping off the night before. His phone showed 3 missed calls from an unknown number and a voicemail. Daniel put it on speaker while he measured out coffee grounds. "Mr. Hayes, this is Jennifer Chen from Pacific Northwest Community College. I'm calling about your application for the Accelerated Business Program. We've reviewed your transcripts and work history, and I'm pleased to inform you that you've been accepted for the spring semester starting in 2 weeks. We're also offering you a partial scholarship based on your academic performance and personal circumstances. Please call me back at your earliest convenience to discuss next steps and financial aid options. Happy New Year." Daniel stood frozen, coffee scoop in hand, trying to process what he'd just heard. The accelerated program. The one he'd applied for months ago. The one that would let him finish his degree in 18 months instead of 3 years, but required full-time attendance. The one he'd applied for knowing he probably couldn't afford it, couldn't make it work with Marcus and his job and everything else. What was that? He turned to find Isabella in the doorway, wrapped in the blanket, her hair a mess and her eyes still soft with sleep. "I got accepted to a program. Business degree, accelerated track. But it's full-time, and there's no way I can afford to quit working, even with a partial scholarship." Isabella crossed the room, took the phone from his hand, and played the message again. When it finished, she looked at him with an intensity that made his chest tight. "How much would you need to make it work?" "Isabella, no. Whatever you're thinking, no. Just tell me. Tuition, living expenses, childcare for Marcus. What would it take?" "It doesn't matter because I'm not taking money from you. That's not what this is." He gestured between them. "I won't be some project you fund, some proof that you're a good person." "That's not what I'm suggesting. The Parent Support Initiative, the one you inspired. It includes education grants for employees pursuing degrees. You qualify, Daniel. You more than qualify. That's still your money. Still you making this possible. No, it's the company's money. Money set aside specifically for people in your situation. All you'd have to do is apply like everyone else." She moved closer, her eyes bright with something that looked like hope. "This is what you want, isn't it? The degree? The chance to build something better for Marcus?" "Of course it's what I want, but I want to earn it, not have it handed to me because I'm sleeping with the CEO." Isabella flinched at the crudeness of it, but didn't back down. "First, we're not sleeping together. We kissed on a couch. Second, you would be earning it by applying, by doing the work. by finishing the program. The grant just makes it possible. That's what it's for. And what happens if this thing between us doesn't work out? If we crash and burn in 3 months, do I lose the grant? Get kicked out of school? Have to explain to everyone why the CEO's charity case suddenly isn't worthy anymore? The grant isn't contingent on us. It's not personal. It's a program with clear criteria and oversight. If we broke up tomorrow, you'd still qualify. She paused. But we're not going to break up in 3 months. You don't know that. No, I don't. But I'm choosing to believe in something good for once. I'm choosing to take a risk on us, and I'm asking you to do the same. Daniel turned away, gripping the counter edge hard enough that his knuckles went white. Every instinct screamed at him to refuse, to maintain his independence, to not owe anything to anyone. But another voice, quieter but growing stronger, asked what he was actually protecting by saying no. His pride? His fear? Or his son's future? I need to think about it, he said finally. Okay, think about it. Isabella came up behind him, wrapped her arms around his waist, rested her cheek against his back. But while you're thinking, consider that maybe accepting help isn't weakness, that maybe the bravest thing you can do is let people care about you. They spent the rest of the day figuring out what the new year might actually look like. Isabella had to return to work on the 2nd, had meetings and obligations she couldn't avoid. Daniel's schedule was inflexible. Work, pick up Marcus, maintain the careful routine that kept their small world functioning. But they found spaces between. Mornings before work when Isabella would stop by with coffee. Evenings after Marcus was asleep when they'd talk on the phone for hours. Stolen lunch breaks in the small park near Daniel's apartment where they'd sit on a bench and just be together. Marcus came home from his sleepover on New Year's Day afternoon, bursting with stories about staying up late and watching movies and eating too much candy. He stopped mid-sentence when he saw Isabella sitting at their kitchen table. Isabella! He launched himself at her and she caught him in a hug that was both surprised and delighted. Hey, Marcus. Miss me? So much. Dad said you weren't coming back, but I knew he was wrong because you're our friend, and friends don't just disappear. He pulled back to look at her seriously. You're not going to disappear, right? Not if I can help it, Isabella said, glancing at Daniel. Good, because we got a new Lego set for Christmas, and it's really hard, and Dad's not very good at the instructions, and I think you'd be better at it. Daniel felt something loosen in his chest, watching his son's uncomplicated joy, seeing Isabella smile at Marcus like he'd given her a gift instead of a challenge. I'd love to help, she said, but only if your dad says it's okay. Marcus turned to Daniel with pleading eyes. Can she stay, Dad? Please? Yeah, buddy, she can stay. They built Legos for the next 3 hours, the 3 of them sprawled on the living room floor, following instructions and searching for pieces and laughing when they put sections together wrong and had to start over. It was ordinary and perfect and exactly what Daniel had been too scared to let himself want. When Marcus finally went to bed, exhausted from the weekend's excitement, Isabella and Daniel stood in the kitchen washing dishes together. He's really special, Isabella said softly. You've done an amazing job with him. He makes it easy, most of the time. I want you to know that this, she gestured around the small apartment, this is what I want. Not some fantasy version where you live up to who you think I need you to be. Just this. Just you and Marcus and building Legos on the floor. You say that now, but what about when the novelty wears off? When you remember that you're supposed to be at charity dinners and industry conferences, not washing dishes in a tiny kitchen in Ballard? Isabella dried her hands, turned to face him. I spent 30 years being who I was supposed to be. Following the path my father laid out, meeting expectations, building the perfect image. And you know what? I was miserable. Successful, but miserable. Then one night in the rain, someone showed me what actual goodness looked like. And I can't go back to pretending that world is enough. This world isn't glamorous, Isabella. It's scraping by and worrying about money and fixing things when they break because you can't afford to replace them. I know, and I'm not naive enough to think it'll be easy. But I'd rather struggle with you than be comfortable alone. Daniel pulled her close, buried his face in her hair. I'm still terrified this is going to fall apart. Me too. But let's be terrified together. The next 2 weeks were a crash course in combining their lives. Isabella started spending more time at the apartment, learning the rhythms of Daniel and Marcus's routine. She figured out Marcus's morning schedule, his favorite foods, the specific way his shoes had to be tied or he'd complain all day. She learned which teachers at school were strict and which were lenient, which kids he played with at recess, which subjects he struggled with and which came easily. Daniel watched this integration with a mixture of wonder and anxiety. Part of him kept waiting for the other shoe to drop, for Isabella to realize what she'd signed up for and retreat back to her penthouse. But she kept showing up, kept learning, kept fitting herself into their lives with a determination that was both touching and terrifying. She was there the morning Daniel finally called back the college, confirming his acceptance and applying for the parent support grant. She held his hand while he filled out the paperwork, her presence a silent support that made the impossible feel almost manageable. "You're doing the right thing," she said when he hit submit on the application. "I hope so, because if this doesn't work out, I'll have burned a lot of bridges for nothing. It'll work out. I'll make sure of it." "That's what I'm afraid of," Daniel admitted. "That you'll pull strings or make calls or use your influence to guarantee approval. And then I'll never know if I actually earned it." Isabella's face went serious. "I won't interfere with the grant process. The committee reviews applications blind. They don't know who's applying or what department they work in. You'll be evaluated on merit, nothing else, I promise. And if I don't get it, then we'll figure out another way. Student loans, part-time enrollment, something. But Daniel, you're going to get it. Not because of me, but because you're exactly the kind of person this program was designed to help." The grant committee met on January 15th. Daniel tried to work that day, tried to focus on routine maintenance and simple repairs, but his mind kept drifting to the conference room on the 38th floor where 5 people he'd never met were deciding his future. His phone rang at 3 p.m. An unknown number. "Mr. Hayes? This is Margaret Williams from the Laurent Industries Parent Support Committee. I'm calling about your education grant application." Daniel's hand tightened on the phone. "Yes? I'm pleased to inform you that your application has been approved. The grant will cover full tuition for the Accelerated Business Program, plus a monthly stipend for childcare and living expenses." "Congratulations." The words didn't feel real. Daniel had to ask her to repeat them, had to hear it twice before his brain could process what it meant. "Are you sure? You have the right Daniel Hayes?" "Quite sure. You were one of our strongest applicants. The committee was particularly impressed by your work history, academic record, and personal statement. You should be proud, Mr. Hayes." When he hung up, Daniel stood in the mechanical room for a long moment, surrounded by the hum of machinery and the smell of lubricant, trying to understand that his life had just changed, that the degree he'd been chasing for years was suddenly within reach, that maybe, just maybe, things were actually going to work out. He called Isabella. She picked up on the first ring. "I got it," he said. "The grant. They approved it." Her squeal of joy was so loud he had to hold the phone away from his ear. "I knew it! Daniel, I'm so proud of you. You really didn't interfere? I swear on everything I hold dear, I had nothing to do with the decision. This was all you." Daniel felt something break open in his chest. Not pain this time, but something else. Something that felt dangerously close to hope. "I don't know how to do this," he admitted. "How to accept something this big. How to believe I deserve it." "You start by saying thank you, and then you show up and do the work and prove to yourself that you were worthy of it all along." Her voice softened. "I'm so happy for you, Daniel, for you and Marcus. This is going to change everything." That night, Daniel told Marcus about the program, about how he'd be going to school full-time starting in 2 weeks, about how things were going to be different, but also better. Marcus listened carefully, his small face serious. "Does this mean you won't be as tired all the time?" "Eventually, yeah. Once I finish the degree, I'll be able to get a better job. Won't have to work so many hours." "And Isabella, she'll still be around?" Daniel glanced at Isabella, who was sitting on the couch pretending not to listen to this conversation. "Yeah, buddy, she'll still be around." "Good," Marcus nodded decisively. "Then I think it's a good idea, even if change is scary." "When did you get so smart?" "I've always been smart. You just don't always notice because you're busy being worried." Out of the mouths of children. The first day of the accelerated program arrived with the kind of cold rain that Seattle specialized in. Not quite freezing, not quite harmless, just endless and gray. Daniel dropped Marcus at school, then drove to the community college campus with his stomach in knots. He was older than most of the other students, more weathered, carrying the weight of different experiences. But he also brought something they didn't have: absolute certainty about why he was there, what it meant, what it would cost if he failed. The program was intense. Full days of classes, hours of homework, group projects, and presentations and exams that came faster than he could prepare for. Daniel fell into a routine that was somehow more exhausting than working 2 jobs. Up at 5 to study before getting Marcus ready for school, classes until 3, picking up Marcus and helping with homework, dinner, and bedtime routine, then studying until midnight or later. Isabella became essential to making it work. She picked up Marcus from school when Daniel had late classes. She helped with dinner, with homework, with the million small tasks that filled a day. She studied alongside Daniel in the evenings, working on her own projects while he memorized accounting principles and economic theories. "You don't have to do this," he told her one night in late February, when she was helping Marcus with a science project about volcanoes while Daniel tried to finish a paper on market analysis. "You have your own life, your own responsibilities." "This is my life now," she said simply. "These 2 people, this small apartment, building volcanoes out of baking soda and red food coloring. This is what I choose." And Daniel started to believe her, started to let himself trust that maybe this wasn't temporary, that maybe she really meant it when she said she wasn't going anywhere. But belief was one thing, the reality of their different worlds was another. It came to a head in early March, when Isabella had to attend a major industry conference in San Francisco. 3 days of networking and presentations and all the things that came with running a billion-dollar company. She'd asked Daniel to come with her, offered to bring Marcus too, make it a family trip. "I can't," Daniel had said. "I've got midterms that week. Can't miss class." Then just the weekend. Fly down Friday night, back Sunday morning. The conference ends Saturday, but we could stay an extra day, show Marcus the aquarium. "Isabella, a last-minute flight for 2 people? Do you know what that costs?" "I'll cover it. It's not—" "No." Daniel's voice was sharp. "We've talked about this. I won't be the guy you bankroll. I can't be that person. It's 1 plane ticket. It's not— It's the start of a pattern. You paying for things I can't afford, me getting comfortable with it, Marcus learning that money just appears when we need it. That's not the lesson I want to teach him." They'd fought about it for hours, both of them frustrated, both feeling misunderstood. Isabella couldn't comprehend why accepting help was such a burden for Daniel. Daniel couldn't explain why maintaining his independence mattered more than a weekend in San Francisco. She went to the conference alone. They barely spoke while she was gone, communication limited to brief text messages about Marcus's day and what he'd eaten for dinner. When she came back Sunday night, the distance between them felt vast. "We can't keep doing this," Isabella said, standing in Daniel's small living room while Marcus slept in the next room. "Every time money comes up, you shut down. You won't let me help, won't let me contribute, won't even let me buy plane tickets for a weekend trip. Because the second I start accepting your money for things like that, I become dependent. I become the broke boyfriend who needs his rich girlfriend to make life work. And that's not who I want to be. So what do you want? To keep struggling unnecessarily, just to prove a point? To deny Marcus experiences because you're too proud to let me help provide them? That's not fair. Neither is this. Neither is you treating my money like it's some kind of poison that'll corrupt you if you touch it. I'm not trying to control you or buy you or whatever you think I'm doing. I just want to share my life with you. And part of my life is resources that could make things easier." Daniel ran his hands through his hair, exhausted from a weekend of single parenting and studying and missing her. "I don't know how to do this. Don't know how to be with someone who has so much when I have so little. Don't know how to let you in without losing myself." Isabella's eyes filled with tears. "I don't know how to do this either. Don't know how to love someone who won't let himself be loved, who won't accept that maybe you deserve good things, deserve help, deserve to not struggle alone." They stood there in the small living room, the space between them feeling like an ocean. "I love you," Isabella said finally. "I'm in love with you, Daniel Hayes. And I don't know how to make you believe that it's real, that it's not about pity or charity or fixing you, that I just want you." "I love you too," Daniel said, and his voice broke. "That's why this is so hard. Because I'm terrified that loving you means losing myself, That I'll wake up one day and realize I'm not the father I want to be, not the man I thought I was. That I've become someone Marcus won't recognize. Then tell me what you need. Tell me how to make this work without you feeling like you're sacrificing who you are. Daniel thought about it for a long moment. I need you to let me struggle sometimes. To let me figure things out on my own, even when you could make it easier. I need to know that I can support my son and finish school and build something without your money smoothing over every rough edge. And I need you to let me in, to trust that I'm not keeping score, not looking for ways to hold things over you, to believe that sharing resources isn't the same as losing independence. They came together in the middle of the room, holding each other like the solution to an impossible equation. It wasn't perfect. It didn't solve everything. But it was a start. Spring arrived in Seattle with the tentative hope that came after months of gray rain. Cherry blossoms bloomed along the streets, turning the city pink and white. And Daniel found himself thinking that maybe things really could work out after all. The accelerated program was brutal, but he was surviving. More than surviving, excelling. His professors praised his work ethic, his practical understanding of business concepts that other students only knew from textbooks. He'd made study groups with people half his age who treated him with respect instead of pity, who valued his real-world experience. And Isabella had learned to step back when he needed to struggle, to let him solve problems on his own even when she could have made things easier with a phone call or a check. It wasn't easy for her. Daniel could see the effort it took to watch him stress over a broken-down car or a late rent payment when she could fix it in seconds. But she respected his boundaries, trusted his need for independence. They'd found a rhythm that worked. Isabella still spent most nights at the apartment, had even cleared out a drawer for her clothes, and kept a toothbrush in the bathroom. Marcus had stopped asking when she was coming over because she was simply always there, as constant as Daniel himself. But there were still moments when their different worlds collided in ways that reminded them both how fragile this balance really was. It happened in late April during finals week. Daniel was deep into studying for his economics exam. Marcus was at a friend's house, and Isabella was working from the apartment, taking calls from the small balcony so she wouldn't disturb him. He heard her voice rise, heard the tension that meant something was wrong. When she came back inside, her face was pale. What happened? The board. They're calling an emergency meeting tomorrow. Some of my father's old partners are making a move to challenge my decisions, questioning my leadership. She sank onto the couch, her hands shaking slightly. They're saying I've lost focus, that I'm not prioritizing the company's interests, that I'm too young and inexperienced to be making major strategic decisions alone. What decisions are they talking about? The Parent Support Initiative, primarily. They're calling it wasteful spending, saying it's bleeding resources that should go to expansion and shareholder returns. Her voice was bitter. They're not wrong about the cost. It's expensive. But it's also the right thing to do, and I'm not backing down on it. Daniel felt his stomach drop. The initiative that was funding his education, supporting dozens of other employees, making real differences in people's lives, it was under attack. And indirectly, he was the reason. This is because of me, he said. Because you changed the outsourcing plan, because you created a program that I inspired. They think you're making emotional decisions instead of business ones. They think a lot of things. Most of them are wrong. But not all of them. Daniel closed his textbook, the exam suddenly feeling very far away. Isabella, if they're right, if this initiative is actually hurting the company, it's not. The numbers are solid. Employee retention is up. Productivity is up. Our reputation as an employer has never been better. This is good business, not just good ethics. She stood, paced to the window. But they see a 30-year-old woman making changes to her father's legacy, and they assume I don't know what I'm doing, that I'm ruled by feelings instead of facts. What do you need? She turned to look at him, and her eyes were fierce. I need you to trust that I can fight this battle, that I can defend what we've built without it costing us everything. I do trust you. But Isabella, if it comes down to choosing between the company and this program, between your position and me, it won't. But if it does, then I choose you. She said it with such finality that Daniel's breath caught. I choose you and Marcus and this life we're building. I choose the version of myself that you helped me find. And if the board can't accept that, then they can find themselves a new CEO. You don't mean that. That company is your father's legacy. You can't just walk away. Watch me. She crossed the room, took his hands in hers. My father built a successful company, yes. But you know what he told me right before he died? During one of our last real conversations before the fight? He said that he regretted missing so much of my childhood, that he wished he'd spent less time in board meetings and more time teaching me to ride a bike or helping with homework. He said that at the end of your life, nobody wishes they'd worked more. Tears were streaming down her face now, and Daniel pulled her close. He was wrong about a lot of things, Isabella continued, her voice muffled against Daniel's chest. But he was right about that, and I won't make the same mistake. I won't sacrifice the people I love for profit margins and shareholder approval. They stood like that for a long time, holding each other while the spring afternoon faded into evening. When Marcus came home, chattering about his playdate, they pulled themselves together and made dinner and helped with homework and pretended everything was normal. But that night, after Marcus was asleep, Isabella prepared for the board meeting with the intensity that Daniel had never seen before. She reviewed financial reports, prepared counterarguments, built a presentation that laid out exactly why the Parent Support Initiative was both ethically sound and economically smart. You should sleep, Daniel said at midnight when she was still working. I'll sleep when this is over. Isabella said, I need you to understand something. She turned to face him, her eyes red from staring at screens. Tomorrow, they're going to try to make me choose. The company or the changes I've made, the legacy or the future. And I need you to know that I've already chosen. No matter what happens in that boardroom, no matter what they threaten or promise or demand, I'm not giving this up. I'm not giving you up. Daniel felt something crack open in his chest. For months, he'd been waiting for her to realize what she'd given up to be with him, waiting for her to wake up and understand the sacrifice wasn't worth it. But looking at her now, fierce and determined and ready to fight the world for what they'd built together, he finally understood that she meant it. She wasn't going anywhere. The next morning, Isabella dressed in her armor, a sharp black suit, her hair pulled back severely, minimal makeup that somehow made her look even more formidable. She was every inch the CEO, the woman who commanded boardrooms and made billion-dollar decisions. But before she left, she knelt down beside Marcus, who was eating breakfast, and helped him tie his shoes. You're going to do great today, Marcus said seriously, because you're really smart and you care about people, and that's what good bosses do. Isabella's eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them back. Thanks, Marcus. That means a lot. And if they're mean to you, you should tell them that my dad says being mean is for people who are scared inside. Daniel choked on his coffee. Isabella laughed, actually laughed, some of the tension breaking. I'll definitely keep that in mind. She kissed Marcus on the head, kissed Daniel goodbye, and walked out the door looking like she was heading into battle. Because she was. Daniel tried to focus on his economics exam that afternoon, but his mind kept drifting to the boardroom on the 42nd floor. He imagined Isabella facing down the men who'd worked with her father, who saw her as an interloper in their domain. Imagined her defending decisions that had nothing to do with profit and everything to do with people. His phone buzzed halfway through the exam. A text from Rick. Something big happening upstairs. Heard Laurence in a 5-hour board meeting. Security's been tighter than usual all day. You know anything about it? Daniel typed back. No idea. It wasn't exactly a lie. The exam ended at 4. Daniel picked up Marcus, took him home, tried to keep busy with dinner preparation and homework help, but his phone stayed silent, and the waiting was agony. At 7 p.m., the door opened. Isabella walked in, and Daniel's heart stopped at the look on her face. What happened? She set down her briefcase, took off her jacket, and sank onto the couch. For a long moment, she just sat there, staring at nothing. Isabella, talk to me. What did they say? They gave me an ultimatum. Roll back the Parent Support Initiative, return to the original efficiency plans, prove I could make the hard business decisions. Or face a vote of no confidence from the board. Daniel felt the floor drop out from under him. And I told them no. Told them that the initiative stays, that the company's responsibility extends beyond shareholder returns, that if they couldn't see the value in investing in people, then they'd forgotten what my father actually stood for. She looked up at him, and there was something like wonder in her eyes. Then I reminded them that I control 52% of voting shares, that my father made sure I'd have majority control specifically so the board couldn't override me on matters of principle, that they could call for a vote of no confidence all they wanted, but it wouldn't change the outcome. What did they do? 3 of them resigned on the spot, said they wouldn't be part of a company run by emotional decision-making and misplaced priorities. She laughed, but it was shaky. The others backed down, realized that I wasn't bluffing, that I'd rather burn the whole thing down than compromise on this. Daniel knelt in front of her, took her hands. Are you okay? I don't know. I just ended relationships with men who worked with my father for 30 years. I probably damaged the company's reputation in certain circles. I chose principle over pragmatism, and there's going to be fallout. She met his eyes. But I'd do it again. I'd do it 1,000 times because the alternative was becoming someone I couldn't recognize in the mirror. I'm so sorry. This is my fault. If I hadn't... Don't you dare apologize for inspiring something good. Those men were always going to challenge me eventually. Better to find out now who I can trust and who sees me as a placeholder for my father. She squeezed his hands. And Daniel? Walking out of that boardroom knowing I'd just fought for something I believed in instead of just accepting how things have always been? I felt more like my father's daughter than I have in the entire year since he died. Marcus appeared in the doorway, rubbing sleep from his eyes. Why is everyone being loud? Sorry, buddy, we'll be quieter. Daniel started to stand, but Isabella stopped him. Actually, I have something I want to ask you both, if now's okay. Something in her tone made Daniel's heart race. Marcus came fully into the room, curious. Isabella took a deep breath. I've been thinking about this for a while, about what I want, what matters, what kind of life I want to build. And I keep coming back to the same answer. You two, this apartment, the moments between the big dramatic decisions where we're just existing together. Isabella, let me finish, please. She turned to Marcus. Marcus, how would you feel if I moved in here? Officially, not just staying over most nights, but actually living here with you and your dad. Marcus's eyes went huge. Like, all the time? With all your stuff? All the time. With all my stuff. I'd help make breakfast and pack your lunch and be here when you get home from school. I'd be part of your family if you'd have me. Yes! Marcus launched himself at Isabella, nearly knocking her over. Yes, yes, yes! Dad, she wants to live with us. Can she? Please? Daniel was still kneeling on the floor, trying to process what was happening. Isabella, you have a mansion on Mercer Island. You have everything anyone could want. You really want to give that up for a third-floor walk-up in Ballard? I don't want to give anything up. I want to gain everything that actually matters. She disentangled herself from Marcus's hug, kept her eyes on Daniel. I'm not saying I'll stop being CEO. I'm not saying I won't still have responsibilities and obligations and long days, but I want this to be home. Want to wake up next to you every morning. Want to help Marcus with homework and argue about whose turn it is to do dishes and build a real life instead of just visiting one. What about the mansion? I'll keep it. Use it for entertaining when necessary. Maybe an office for days I need to work from home without interruptions. But this? She gestured around the small apartment with its worn furniture and Marcus's drawings on the refrigerator. This is where I want to live. Marcus was bouncing with excitement. We can share my Legos and you can have the extra drawer in Dad's dresser. And oh, we need to make space in the bathroom for your stuff. He ran off to start planning, leaving Daniel and Isabella alone. Are you sure? Daniel asked quietly. Really sure? Because once you do this, once you make this apartment your home, there's no pretending anymore. Everyone will know. Your board, your employees, everyone in your world will know that you're with a guy who's barely scraping by. Good, let them know. Let them see that the CEO of Laurent Industries chooses to live in a small apartment with a man she loves and his incredible son. Let them judge. I don't care anymore, Daniel. I'm done living my life for other people's approval. Daniel pulled her close, buried his face in her hair, and let himself finally believe it. This was real. This was happening. This brilliant, beautiful woman who could have anything wanted him, wanted them, wanted this life they'd cobbled together from broken pieces. Okay, he whispered. Okay. Yes. Move in. Make this place home. Stay forever. Forever sounds perfect. The next few weeks were chaos in the best possible way. Isabella hired movers to bring her essential belongings to the apartment: clothes, books, a coffee maker that probably cost more than Daniel's monthly rent. The mansion on Mercer Island became her formal residence on paper, but the apartment in Ballard became where she actually lived. Marcus was over the moon, helping Isabella organize her things, giving her tours of the neighborhood, introducing her to his friends as "my dad's girlfriend who lives with us now." The other parents did double takes when they realized which Isabella Laurent he was talking about, but Marcus didn't understand or care about the significance. To him, she was just Isabella, the person who made funny-shaped pancakes on Saturday mornings and helped with math homework and read him stories before bed. Daniel finished his spring semester with straight A's, professors commenting on his exceptional work. The program director pulled him aside one day. "Mr. Hayes, we're impressed with your performance. Have you given any thought to what you'll do after graduation?" "Get a job, hopefully, something that pays better than facilities maintenance." The director smiled. "I think you can aim higher than that. We've had several local companies ask about our top graduates. Your name came up more than once. Keep your options open." Daniel walked out of that meeting feeling like maybe, just maybe, he was building towards something real, something sustainable. That evening, he found Isabella and Marcus on the balcony, looking at something on her tablet. "What are you two plotting?" "Not plotting, planning," Marcus said seriously. "We're looking at houses." Daniel's stomach dropped. "Houses?" Isabella looked up, her expression careful. "Just browsing, hypothetically. Marcus mentioned that his friend Tyler has a backyard with a swing set, and it got us talking about what it might be like to have more space. Isabella, we can't afford a house. Even with my degree, even with a better job, Seattle real estate is, I know, but I can afford one, and before you give me the speech about independence and not accepting my money, hear me out." She set down the tablet. "What if we found a place together? Something with enough space for all of us. A yard for Marcus. Maybe a garage where you could work on cars if you wanted. I'd pay the down payment, but we'd split the mortgage based on our incomes. You'd contribute what you can, I'd cover the rest. Legal partnership, everything documented, fair and equitable." "That's not fair or equitable. You'd be paying 90% of it." "So? You pay 100% of the emotional labor that keeps this family functioning. You make sure Marcus is happy and healthy and growing into a good human. You taught me what it means to actually live instead of just exist. That's worth a lot more than money, Daniel." Marcus tugged on his father's sleeve. "Can we at least look? Tyler's house has a big tree that's perfect for a treehouse, and I've always wanted a treehouse." Daniel looked at his son's hopeful face, at Isabella's careful expression that tried to hide how much this meant to her, and felt his resistance crumbling. "Just looking," he said. "No promises." They spent the next month house hunting, and despite his reservations, Daniel found himself getting caught up in the possibilities. A craftsman in Greenwood with a huge backyard and a basement perfect for a workshop. A mid-century modern in maple leaf with big windows and built-in bookshelves. A newer construction in Northgate with an open floor plan and a 2-car garage. Isabella let him set the parameters. Nothing too ostentatious, nothing that would make him feel like he was living in her world instead of theirs. She vetoed places that were too big or too expensive looking, understanding without him having to explain that he needed to be able to picture himself belonging there. They found it in early June, just as Daniel was finishing his summer semester. A small bungalow in Finney Ridge, built in the 1920s and lovingly maintained. 3 bedrooms, 1.5 baths, a kitchen that had been updated but kept its original character. And most importantly, a backyard with a massive oak tree that seemed designed specifically for a treehouse. Marcus ran straight for the tree the moment they walked into the yard, already planning where the ladder would go, where the walls would be, whether they could fit a rope swing too. "This is it," Isabella said quietly, standing beside Daniel on the back porch. "This is home. It's expensive, even with both of us contributing. It's worth it. Look at him." She pointed to Marcus, who was measuring the tree trunk with his outstretched arms. "Look at how happy he is. And imagine coming home to this every day instead of that apartment building where the heat barely works and the neighbors blast music at 3 a.m. The apartment's not that bad. The apartment served its purpose. It was survival. But Daniel, you don't have to just survive anymore. You're allowed to actually thrive." He turned to look at her, This woman who'd walked into his life on a rain-soaked street and changed everything. You really want this? Want to buy a house with a guy who's still 6 months from finishing his degree, who has no idea what kind of job he'll get, who comes with a 6-year-old and a lot of baggage? I want exactly that. The degree in progress, the 6-year-old, the baggage, all of it. But mostly I want you. Want to build a life that's ours, not mine or yours, but ours together. Daniel kissed her there on the back porch, while Marcus discovered a family of squirrels living in the oak tree and declared it the best house in the entire world. They made an offer that night. It was accepted 2 days later. The closing was scheduled for late July, which gave Daniel time to finish his summer semester and prepare for the move. But first, there was something else he needed to do. On a Saturday morning in mid-June, Daniel drove to a cemetery south of the city to a plot overlooking Puget Sound, where Isabella's father had been buried. He'd never visited before, had never felt like he had the right. But today felt important. He stood in front of the headstone, simple black granite with just a name and dates, nothing fancy despite the fortune the man had accumulated. Daniel had brought flowers, feeling foolish about it, not sure what the protocol was for visiting the grave of someone you'd never met. "Mr. Laurent," he said, feeling even more foolish talking to a piece of stone. "My name's Daniel Hayes. I worked in facilities maintenance at your company, and I'm in love with your daughter." A bird sang somewhere in the trees behind him. The wind carried the salt smell of the sound. "I don't know what you'd think about that. About me. I don't have much to offer except that I see her. Really see her. Not just the CEO or the empire or the last name. I see the woman who learned to change brake pads because she wanted to understand a different world. The woman who builds Legos with my son and makes him feel like he matters. The woman who fought her entire board to defend a principle instead of a profit margin." Daniel knelt down, placed the flowers against the headstone. "She misses you. Talks about you all the time, about the lessons you taught her, the legacy you left. And I think you'd be proud of her. Not because she's running the company successfully, but because she's figured out how to honor what you built while also making it her own. She's better than either of us probably deserve, and I promise I'll spend every day trying to be worthy of her." He stood, brushed off his knees, and turned to leave. Isabella was standing 10 feet behind him, tears streaming down her face. "How long have you been there?" Daniel asked. "Long enough." She closed the distance between them, took his hand. "I come here sometimes. To talk to him, to ask for guidance, to apologize for the fight we had. Today, I wanted to tell him about the house, about us, about the life we're building." "What do you think he'd say?" Isabella looked at the headstone, her father's name carved in stone. "I think he'd say I was being reckless, that I was making emotional decisions, that I should focus on the company, that I was too young to know what I really wanted." She smiled through her tears. "And then I think he'd meet you and Marcus and realize that maybe I know exactly what I want after all. That maybe the best legacy he left me wasn't the company but the ability to recognize what actually matters." They stood together in front of the grave, two people from different worlds who'd somehow found each other in a rainstorm and built something real from the wreckage of that night. "Thank you for stopping," Isabella whispered, "that night in the rain. Thank you for seeing someone who needed help instead of just a drunk woman in an expensive dress. Thank you for changing my life." "You changed mine too," Daniel said. "Gave me hope that maybe I could be more than just a guy struggling to survive, that maybe I could actually build something. We're building it together, the house, the life, the future, all of it together." Daniel's graduation came in mid-August, 2 weeks after they'd moved into the house in Finney Ridge. It was a small ceremony, nothing like the elaborate productions at major universities, but to Daniel, it meant everything. He walked across the stage in a borrowed cap and gown to receive his diploma, a business degree he'd been chasing for a decade, finally complete. The audience was tiny, just Isabella and Marcus, Jimmy Chen from the garage, and Rick Martinez from work, but their applause was deafening. Marcus whooped and cheered like his father had just won the Olympics. Isabella cried openly, not caring who saw. And Daniel felt something he'd almost forgotten was possible. Pride. Not the destructive kind that had kept him from accepting help, but the good kind. The kind that came from setting a goal and working yourself raw to achieve it, from proving to yourself that you could do hard things. After the ceremony, Marcus ran up and threw his arms around Daniel's waist, I'm so proud of you, Dad. You did it. You graduated. We did it, buddy. Couldn't have made it without you being patient all those nights I had to study instead of play. Ajay, does this mean you get a better job now? One where you're not always tired? That's the plan. Isabella hugged him next, whispered in his ear, I'm so proud of you. Your father would be too. Daniel's father had died 3 years ago, had never known about Marcus, had never reconciled with the son who'd dropped out of college to work construction. But standing there with his degree in hand and his family around him, Daniel chose to believe Isabella was right. Chose to believe that somewhere, somehow, his parents knew he'd made it. The job offers started coming in within a week. The program director had been right. Several companies were interested in Daniel's combination of practical experience and newly minted degree. But it was an offer from Laurent Industries itself that surprised him most. Director of Facilities Operations, Daniel read from the email, sitting at their new kitchen table while Isabella made coffee, overseeing all maintenance and facilities management for the company, reporting directly to the VP of Operations. It's a good offer, Isabella said carefully. Competitive salary, full benefits, opportunity for advancement. It's also working for my girlfriend's company, for you, essentially. You'd be reporting to Marcus Kim, not me. I wouldn't have any direct authority over your work. The interview process would be standard. You'd have to earn the position on merit, not because of our relationship. Daniel studied the email, doing the math in his head. The salary would change everything, allow him to contribute equally to the mortgage, to build savings, to give Marcus opportunities he'd never dreamed possible. But it would also mean that his success was always linked to Isabella, that people would assume he got where he was because of who he was sleeping with, not what he could actually do. I need to think about it, he said. He thought about it for 3 days, weighing options and possibilities. Interviewed with 2 other companies, both offering good positions with room for growth. One was a property management firm, the other a commercial real estate developer. Both would be clean breaks from Isabella's world, from any appearance of impropriety. But neither felt quite right. On the 3rd night, he found Isabella in their backyard, watching Marcus show off the partially built treehouse that Daniel and Jimmy had been working on. I'm going to take the interview, Daniel said, at Laurent Industries. Not because you suggested it, but because it's actually the best fit for what I want to do. But I need you to promise me something. Anything. Promise that if I get the job, it's because I earned it. That Marcus Kim interviewed me fairly, that my application went through the same process as everyone else's, that you had nothing to do with it. Isabella took his hand. I promise. In fact, I've already recused myself from anything related to that position. Marcus doesn't even know we're together. The relationship disclosure forms haven't been filed yet because we're waiting until after you interview. And if I don't get it, then you take one of the other offers and I cheer you on just as hard. This isn't about you working for my company, Daniel. It's about you finding the right place to use your skills and experience. If that's Laurent Industries, great. If it's somewhere else, equally great. The interview was intense. 3 hours with Marcus Kim and his team, diving deep into Daniel's experience, his vision for modernizing facilities operations, his ideas for integrating the Parent Support Initiative into daily operations. They asked hard questions, challenged his assumptions, made him prove he could think strategically. Marcus Kim called 2 days later with an offer. Director of Facilities Operations starting in 2 weeks. You beat out some impressive candidates, Marcus said. Your combination of hands-on experience and formal education was exactly what we needed. Welcome to the team. Daniel started his new position on the 1st of September, walking into Laurent Industries not through the basement service entrance, but through the main lobby like everyone else. He had an office on the 35th floor, a team of 15 people reporting to him, and responsibility for keeping a billion-dollar company's infrastructure running smoothly. The first day was surreal. People who'd never acknowledged him before suddenly knew his name, wanted to schedule meetings, asked for his input. Rick Martinez, who'd been his supervisor, now reported to him, a transition they'd both agreed to handle with humor and mutual respect. Don't let it go to your head, Hayes, Rick said, grinning. You're still the same guy who used to fix boilers in a basement. And you're still the guy who taught me half of what I know, Daniel shot back. But the best part of the new job was the impact he could have. Daniel implemented new training programs for facilities staff, upgraded equipment that had been limping along for years, created pathways for people to advance from entry-level positions to skilled trades. He made sure the parent support initiative's benefits reached the people who needed them most, who understood exactly what it meant to struggle. Within 3 months, employee satisfaction in facilities had jumped 20%. Efficiency improved. Costs actually decreased despite the investments, because equipment that was properly maintained broke down less often. In a board meeting in December, his first time presenting to the full board, one of the members who'd challenged Isabella back in April stood up. "I owe you an apology, Ms. Laurent," the man said stiffly. "The Parent Support Initiative and associated programs have exceeded projections in every measurable way. Retention is up, productivity is up, our reputation as an employer has improved significantly. I was wrong to oppose it." Isabella accepted the apology with grace, but when she caught Daniel's eye across the conference table, her smile said everything else. That Christmas was nothing like the year before. Instead of a small apartment with a struggling artificial tree, they gathered in their house in Finney Ridge. Daniel's old co-workers came over for a party, along with some of Isabella's executives who'd become genuine friends rather than just professional contacts. Marcus ran around showing everyone the treehouse, which was finally finished and equipped with a rope swing that he used approximately 900 times a day. Jimmy Chen cornered Daniel in the kitchen at one point. "Look at you, director of operations, living in a real house, raising a good kid." He shook his head, smiling. "Never doubted you'd make it, Hayes. Just didn't expect it to happen quite like this." "Neither did I," Daniel admitted. "Still feels surreal sometimes." "That woman of yours, she's something special." "Yeah, she is." "So when are you going to marry her?" The question caught Daniel off guard. He and Isabella hadn't talked about marriage, hadn't pushed beyond the commitment they'd already made. They were living together, building a life, raising Marcus as a team. Marriage felt like it would just be paperwork at this point. But later that night, after everyone had left and Marcus was asleep, and they were cleaning up the debris of the party, Daniel found himself thinking about Jimmy's question. "What would you say," he asked Isabella, "if I asked you to marry me?" She froze, a wine glass halfway to the dishwasher. "Is that a hypothetical question or an actual proposal?" "Hypothetical, for now. Just curious what your answer would be." Isabella set down the glass, turned to face him fully. "I'd say yes, without hesitation, without conditions, without a single doubt in my mind. I'd say yes because you're the best man I've ever known, because I love you more than I knew it was possible to love someone, because I want to spend the rest of my life building this with you. Even though I'm still figuring things out, even though I'll probably never be as successful as you, never make as much money, never move in the circles you were born into. Especially because of all that. Because you keep me grounded, remind me what actually matters, show me every day what it means to live with integrity and purpose." She moved closer. "So yes. If you asked, I'd say yes, but only when you're ready, when it feels right to you, not because you think it's what I want or need." Daniel kissed her there in their kitchen, surrounded by the comfortable mess of a life well lived, and decided that maybe Jimmy Chen was right. Maybe it was time to stop being cautious, stop protecting himself from potential loss, and actually commit fully to the life they were building. He started planning. The proposal happened on a Saturday in March, almost exactly a year after they'd moved into the house. Daniel took Isabella and Marcus to Pike Place Market, the same place where Isabella had first asked him to meet her, where they'd started this whole journey. They wandered through the stalls, Marcus chattering about the flying fish and the weird vegetables, and could they please get some flowers for the dining room table. When they reached the railing overlooking Elliott Bay, Daniel pulled out the ring he'd been carrying for 2 weeks. It wasn't fancy. He couldn't afford fancy, even with his new salary, and he knew Isabella wouldn't want it anyway. It was a simple silver band with a small diamond, purchased from a local jeweler who'd worked with Daniel to find something meaningful rather than expensive. He got down on one knee right there in the market, with tourists and locals swirling around them, Marcus grinning like he'd known this was coming. "Isabella Laurent," Daniel said, his voice only shaking slightly. "You pulled me out of survival mode and taught me how to actually live. You love my son like he's your own. You fight for what's right, even when it costs you. And you chose this life, chose us, even when you could have had anything else. Will you marry me?" Isabella was crying, nodding, pulling him to his feet before he could even finish the question. Yes, yes, absolutely yes. Marcus cheered. Random tourists applauded, and Daniel slid the ring onto Isabella's finger, marveling at how something so small could represent something so enormous. They got married 4 months later in the backyard of their house in Finney Ridge. No elaborate ceremony, no society wedding, just close friends and family, a simple arch decorated with flowers from Pike Place Market, and vows they'd written themselves. Daniel promised to always see her, really see her, not just the CEO or the success, but the woman underneath. To challenge her when she needed challenging and support her when she needed support. To build a life together that honored both their pasts while creating something new. Isabella promised to never stop learning, never stop growing, never take for granted the gift of being part of this family. To love Marcus like her own. To respect Daniel's need for independence while building genuine partnership. To choose them, every single day, over everything else the world might offer. Marcus served as ring bearer, taking his job very seriously, only slightly distracted by the treehouse visible from the ceremony site. When they kissed as husband and wife, the small gathering erupted in applause. And Daniel thought about the night in the rain, about the split-second decision to stop and help a stranger, about how one simple act of kindness had cascaded into this, into a life he'd never imagined he could have. That night, after the party had ended and Marcus was asleep in his room, Daniel and Isabella sat in the treehouse, looking out at the lights of the city spread below them. "Think he'd approve?" Daniel asked, meaning her father. "I think he'd love you, would probably try to recruit you to run the whole company eventually." Isabella leaned against his shoulder. "But more importantly, I think he'd be happy that I'm happy, that I found someone who sees me as more than the next generation of Laurent leadership. You're so much more than that." "I know, because you showed me." They sat in comfortable silence, listening to the night sounds of the neighborhood, distant traffic, a dog barking, wind in the oak leaves above them. "You know what's funny?" Isabella said. "A year and a half ago, I was standing in the rain, drunk and grieving and ready to give up on everything. I thought I'd lost my way, lost my purpose, lost any chance at being happy. And then this maintenance guy pulled me back from traffic and changed absolutely everything. I was just doing what anyone would do. No, you were doing what you would do, what the man you are would do. And that made all the difference." She took his hand. "Thank you for stopping, Daniel. Thank you for saving me. Thank you for letting me." 6 months later, on a crisp October evening, Daniel arrived home from work to find Isabella and Marcus in the kitchen, looking suspiciously pleased with themselves. "What are you two plotting?" "Not plotting," Marcus said, echoing the same words he'd used when they were house hunting. "Planning." Isabella held up an envelope. "This came today, from the Pacific Northwest Community College Foundation. They want to name a scholarship after you, the Daniel Hayes Memorial Scholarship for Single Parents Pursuing Education." Daniel took the envelope, read the letter inside. The foundation was offering full-ride scholarships to single parents returning to school, funded by donations from Laurent Industries employees who'd been inspired by Daniel's story. "Memorial?" he said. "I'm not dead." "Poor word choice on their part," Isabella admitted. "But Daniel, this is incredible. Your story, what you did while raising Marcus and working full-time, it inspired people. They want to make it possible for others to follow the same path." "I don't know what to say." "Say yes. Let them honor what you accomplished. Let your struggle mean something for people who are still struggling." Daniel thought about the version of himself from 2 years ago, exhausted, hopeless, surviving, but not really living. Thought about how different things were now, how much had changed because one person had seen him and decided he mattered. "Okay, yes. If it helps even one person, it's worth it." Marcus hugged him, and Isabella joined in, and they stood there in their kitchen, this family they'd built from impossible circumstances, grateful for rain-soaked nights and split-second choices and the courage to stop when someone needed help. 2 years after that night in the rain, Daniel Hayes stood in the garage at Northside Auto, teaching a class on basic car maintenance to a group of students from the scholarship program that bore his name. They were single parents, working multiple jobs, fighting exhaustion and doubt, and the constant fear that they'd never be enough. He knew exactly how they felt. "The most important thing," he told them, "isn't knowledge or skill or even determination. It's believing you deserve better, Believing that your struggle doesn't define you, that you're allowed to want more, to reach for more, to become more. A young woman in the back raised her hand. How did you keep going? When everything felt impossible? Daniel thought about it for a moment. I had a reason. My son. He needed me to be more than just surviving, so I kept pushing even when I wanted to quit. But eventually, I learned that I needed to be more too. Not just for him, but for myself. After the class, he drove home to the house in Finney Ridge, to the life he'd built with Isabella and Marcus. He found them in the backyard, Isabella helping Marcus with a science project about photosynthesis, both of them covered in dirt from the plants they'd been examining. How was class? Isabella asked. Good, hard. They're all so tired, so scared they won't make it. They will, because they have you showing them it's possible. Marcus looked up from his plant. Dad, can we build another tree house? This one's getting too small. Already outgrowing it, huh? Yeah, I was thinking we could build one that's even bigger. Maybe with a bridge to connect to another tree. And Isabella could help because she's good at structural engineering now. Since when are you good at structural engineering? Daniel asked his wife. Since I took an online course last month. Figured if I'm going to help build tree houses, I should know what I'm doing. She grinned. Plus, it's actually really interesting. Daniel shook his head, laughing. This woman who ran a billion-dollar company spent her free time taking online courses so she could build better tree houses. This was his life now. All right, let's plan it out. After dinner. That night, after Marcus was asleep and the treehouse plans were sketched out on graph paper, Daniel and Isabella sat on their porch, watching the city lights flicker in the distance. Do you ever think about that night? Isabella asked. The rain, the street, how close it came to ending differently? All the time. I think about what would have happened if I'd driven past, if I decided you weren't my problem. I'd be dead. And you'd be in that apartment still, working yourself into the ground, never knowing what you were capable of. Instead, I'm here, with you, with this life. Daniel pulled her closer. Sometimes I still can't believe it's real. That something that started in a rainstorm with a stranger could become this. It wasn't just the rainstorm. It was you seeing someone who needed help and choosing to stop, choosing kindness over convenience, compassion over caution. Isabella took his hand. That's who you are, Daniel Hayes. The man who stops in the rain. And you're the woman who was brave enough to change, to let go of who you thought you had to be, and become who you actually wanted to be. They sat in comfortable silence, two people who'd saved each other in different ways, who'd built something impossible from the wreckage of that night. Years later, when people asked how they met, Daniel and Isabella would smile and share a look that contained entire conversations. Sometimes they'd tell the story, the storm, the street, the moment everything changed. Sometimes they'd just say they found each other when they both needed finding. But the truth was simpler and more complicated than any story could capture. They met because Daniel Hayes saw someone in trouble and stopped. Because Isabella Laurent let herself be seen, let herself be saved, let herself transform. Because sometimes the bravest thing you can do is pull a stranger from the rain. And sometimes the wisest thing you can do is let yourself be pulled. The kindness we show in moments of crisis ripples outward in ways we can never fully predict. A split-second choice becomes a scholarship that changes lives. A decision to stop becomes a family. A simple act of compassion becomes a legacy. Daniel Hayes pulled Isabella Laurent from the street that night, but she pulled him from something too, from hopelessness, from surviving instead of living, from the belief that he wasn't worthy of good things. They saved each other, built something beautiful from broken pieces, proved that different worlds could fit together when people wanted them to badly enough. And every night, when Daniel tucked Marcus into bed and kissed Isabella goodnight and stood on his porch looking at the city below, he remembered that all of this, every bit of joy, every moment of peace, every piece of the life they'd built, started with one simple choice in the rain. The choice to help. The choice to care. The choice to stop when someone needed saving, even when you had every reason to keep driving. That was the lesson Daniel Hayes taught his son, the legacy he built, the truth he lived every single day. Kindness changes everything, not just for the person receiving it, but for the person choosing it too. Sometimes one act of compassion really can change the world, or at least it can change two worlds enough that they become one.